2:47 a.m., the backup generators at Mercy Ridge Veterans Hospital shut down for exactly 9 seconds. When the emergency lighting flickered back, security cameras captured something that would later destroy 3 careers and send a fortune into federal seizure. A soft-spoken blonde nurse standing alone in the cardiac wing, her body language shifting from submissive civilian to something the paramedics would later describe as predatory calm. 4 armed contractors were already moving through the building. They expected screaming. They expected chaos. What they got instead was a woman who'd spent 7 years keeping special operations soldiers alive in places the Pentagon still won't discuss. By dawn, the gentle nurse everyone dismissed would be zip-tying unconscious mercenaries to hospital beds while FBI tactical units stormed the building. Her name was Emma Reeves, and the people who underestimated her were about to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. If you want to see how a nurse everyone mocked became the most dangerous person in the hospital, stay with me until the very end. Like this video and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. Emma Reeves had perfected the art of invisibility. She moved through the 3rd-floor corridors of Mercy Ridge Veterans Hospital like a shadow. Blonde hair pulled into a simple ponytail, scrubs 2 sizes too large, eyes always down. She spoke in whispers during shift changes. She never contradicted physicians. She apologized for things that weren't her fault. The other nurses thought she was weak. Dr. Marcus Holloway had made it a sport. During morning rounds, he'd interrupt her mid-sentence to finish her patient assessments himself, often incorrectly. Emma, sweetheart, why don't you stick to what you know, vitals and bedpans? She'd nod, lower her gaze, move to the next room. But the veterans noticed things. How she never flinched when code trauma alarms screamed through the building. How her hands stayed steady during chest compressions when everyone else was shaking. How she could start an IV on a patient with collapsed veins in total darkness during a power outage, her fingers moving with mechanical precision. Retired Colonel David Marsh had been watching her for weeks. Stage 4 lung cancer. 3 months to live, maybe 4. He'd requested Emma specifically for his night shifts. "You were military," he said one night, not a question. Emma's hand paused on his morphine drip. "What makes you say that?" "Because you move like my daughter did. Special Forces medic, Afghanistan, 2019. His voice cracked. "She didn't make it home." Emma's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "I'm sorry for your loss." "You didn't answer my question." She adjusted his pillow with practiced gentleness. "Get some rest, Colonel." That was October. By November, Emma had documented something impossible. 17 veterans across Mercy Ridge had experienced catastrophic implant failures within 8 months. Hip replacements shattering under normal weight. Spinal fusion hardware cracking during physical therapy. Knee joints disintegrating 6 weeks post-surgery. The statistical probability was less than 0.002%. She'd spent 3 weeks cross-referencing surgical records, manufacturer data, and patient outcomes. Every failed implant came from the same source, Titan Forge Medical Systems, a defense contractor supplying VA hospitals across the Midwest. Emma compiled everything into a 14-page report and submitted it to hospital administration. 2 days later, she was summoned to the office of Gregory Vasquez, Mercy Ridge's chief operating officer. "Miss Reeves?" He didn't look up from his computer. "This report you submitted." "Yes, sir. I believe there's a serious pattern." "You believe?" He finally met her eyes, his expression carved from ice. "You're a floor nurse, not an orthopedic surgeon, not a biomedical engineer, a floor nurse." Emma kept her voice level. The data shows you have too much time on your hands." He dropped her report into a desk drawer without reading it. "Titan Forge is one of our largest equipment partners. They've supplied this hospital for 12 years without incident. 17 patients. Coincidence, age, pre-existing conditions." He leaned forward. "Do you understand what happens if you spread unfounded accusations about our suppliers? Lawsuits, loss of contracts, jobs disappearing, real consequences." Emma's fingers tightened on the strap of her bag. "Veterans are being hurt. Veterans are being cared for by qualified professionals. You're not one of them." He opened his desk drawer again and pulled out a formal written warning. "This is going in your personnel file. One more incident of overstepping your role and you're terminated. Are we clear?" She stared at the document. "Crystal," she whispered. But Emma didn't stop. She just got quieter. Colonel Marsh was the one who connected her with the real problem. There's a federal investigator, he said during a 3 a.m. morphine adjustment. Pain had carved his face into something skeletal. Agent named Sarah Chow. She's been tracking Titan Forge for 18 months. Money laundering, counterfeit components. But she can't prove the implants are defective without hospital records. Emma checked the hallway before responding. How do you know about her? Because I've been feeding her information. Marsh coughed, wetness rattling in his lungs. My son-in-law works procurement at the Minneapolis VA. He noticed the same patterns you did. Started asking questions. 2 weeks later, his car's brake lines were cut. Emma's pulse didn't spike. That was the thing people never noticed. Her heart rate barely changed during crisis moments. Is he okay? Alive, scared. Marsh grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. Titan Forge isn't just cutting corners. They're manufacturing defective implants in overseas facilities and substituting them for FDA-approved hardware. Executives are pocketing the difference. Millions of dollars. And when veterans get hurt, they bury the complaints. If Agent Chow has been investigating for 18 months, she needs witnesses. Medical staff willing to testify. His grip tightened. I was going to do it. Grand jury hearing scheduled for next month, but I'll be dead by then. Emma carefully removed his hand and adjusted his oxygen flow. You should rest. Reeves. His voice dropped to barely audible. Whatever you did before you came here, whatever you're running from, these people will kill to protect their operation. If you help Chow, they'll come after you. She smoothed his blanket with hands that had once sutured arterial wounds under enemy fire. Get some rest, Colonel. 3 nights later, Colonel Marsh died peacefully in his sleep. Emma held his hand during his final hour. No family present, just a dying warrior and the nurse everyone thought was too gentle for trauma care. She closed his eyes and whispered something in Arabic. Then she pulled out her personal phone and sent an encrypted message to an email address Marsh had made her memorize. I have the evidence you need. Dr. Marcus Holloway was having an exceptionally good morning. His research paper on veteran cardiac outcomes had just been accepted by a major medical journal. The hospital board had approved his request for a new CT scanner, and at 11 a.m., he was scheduled to humiliate Emma Reeves in front of the entire surgical staff. Reeves, he called across the nurse's station. Conference room, now! She followed him silently, her face betraying nothing. Inside, Chief Nursing Officer Patricia Landry and Gregory Vasquez were already waiting. The formal termination paperwork sat on the table between them. Emma, Patricia began, her voice professionally sympathetic, we've received multiple reports about your conduct. From Dr. Holloway? Emma's tone remained neutral. Marcus smiled. Among others. You've been accessing patient records outside your assigned floor, requesting surgical files without authorization. And yesterday, you apparently contacted federal investigators regarding hospital operations. Emma's expression didn't flicker. I contacted no one. Agent Sarah Chow visited this hospital 6 hours ago, Vasquez said coldly. She specifically mentioned a nurse providing information about Titan Forge Medical. I don't know anyone by that name. Don't lie to me. Marcus stepped closer, his voice dripping contempt. You're out of your depth, Emma. You're a mediocre nurse with delusions of competence. You have no medical expertise, no investigative authority, and no future at this hospital. Patricia slid the termination papers forward. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Emma looked at each of them in turn. Her hands rested calmly in her lap. Can I finish my shift? I have 3 critical patients. No, Vasquez said. You're done. Leave your badge and keys. She stood slowly, placing her hospital ID on the table. The veterans on the 3rd floor We'll handle it, Patricia interrupted. Goodbye, Emma. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Emma walked out of Mercy Ridge Veterans Hospital at 11:47 a.m. on November 18th, carrying a single cardboard box containing a coffee mug and a framed photograph no one had ever asked about. The photograph showed 12 soldiers in desert combat gear, their faces exhausted and alive. 5 of them were dead now. Emma had held each one as they died. She spent the next 3 days in her apartment, ignoring calls from former coworkers who wanted gossip. On the 4th day, her burner phone buzzed. Meet me. Usual place. St. Emma drove 40 minutes to a rest stop outside Millbrook, Ohio. Agent Sarah Chow was waiting in an unmarked sedan, her expression grim. They fired you. I'm aware, Emma said. Sarah handed her a manila folder. This is everything we have on Titan Forge. CEO is Richard Dalton, former military procurement officer, discharged for ethics violations in 2015. He partnered with overseas manufacturers to produce implants using substandard materials, surgical steel that's actually low-grade alloy, titanium rods with structural weaknesses. The cost savings are enormous. The failure rate is catastrophic. Emma flipped through surgical reports, financial documents, intercepted emails. How many hospitals? 17 VA facilities across 9 states. Estimated 340 veterans affected. At least 47 have died from complications. Emma's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Why hasn't this gone public? Because Titan Forge has congressional connections. Defense lobbyists, their legal team buries complaints before they reach the media. Sarah leaned forward. But Colonel Marsh's son-in-law was scheduled to testify. His testimony combined with your hospital records would have been enough to trigger a federal investigation. Was scheduled. He disappeared 4 days ago. His wife found their home ransacked. No body, no witnesses. Emma closed the folder carefully. So, you have nothing. I have you. I was just fired. My credibility is destroyed. You're a decorated combat medic with 17 years of military service, Sarah said quietly. 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts. You pulled wounded operators out of a Kandahar ambush that killed 8 Marines. You kept a Delta Force team alive for 46 hours behind enemy lines after their extraction failed. Your testimony isn't just credible, Emma. It's unimpeachable. Emma stared through the windshield at nothing. That person doesn't exist anymore. She does when veterans are dying. Silence stretched between them. The grand jury hearing is in 9 days, Sarah continued. If you testify, we can force Titan Forge to turn over their manufacturing records. We can prove the fraud. We can save lives. Emma's voice came out flat. And if I don't? Richard Dalton walks free. Titan Forge continues operating. More veterans get hurt. Sarah paused. And the soldiers you couldn't save stay unavenged. Emma's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. I'll think about it. She drove back to her apartment and didn't sleep for 36 hours. Mr. Buck. At 2:43 a.m. on November 23rd, Emma's burner phone buzzed again. They know. Get out. Now. SC. She was already moving before the message finished loading. Combat training never really leaves. Her go bag was under the bed, cash, fake ID, disposable phone, Glock 19 she'd never registered. She was dressed and out the back door in 90 seconds. The black SUV arrived 2 minutes later. Emma watched from a neighbor's darkened garage as 3 men in tactical gear swept her apartment. Professional. Efficient. Not police. Contractors. She waited until they left, then drove to a motel 40 miles away and paid cash for a room facing the parking lot. Sarah called at dawn. They killed him. Emma's blood went cold. Who? Marsh's son-in-law. His body was found in a warehouse outside Detroit. Execution style. The grand jury hearing is postponed indefinitely. Sarah's voice cracked. Emma, they're cleaning house. Anyone connected to this investigation is a target. Where are you? Safe house. Federal protection. A pause. You should come in. Let us protect you. Emma looked at the Glock sitting on the cheap motel nightstand. No. Emma, they'll kill everyone who knows the truth. You, me, anyone who can testify. Emma's voice stayed eerily calm. But they made a mistake. What mistake? They think I'm just a nurse. She hung up. For the next 4 days, Emma disappeared completely. No phone calls, no digital footprint. She moved between motels, never staying more than 6 hours. She watched the news coverage of Marsh's son-in-law's murder. The official story was gang violence. The media didn't mention Titan Forge. On the 5th day, Emma received a message from an unknown number. Colonel Marsh left something for you. Mercy Ridge, room 317, tonight. Trusted friend. She knew it was a trap. She went anyway. Mercy Ridge Veterans Hospital looked exactly the same. Emma entered through the loading dock at 1:30 a.m., using an old keycard she'd never returned. The 3rd floor was quiet. Night shift changeover wouldn't happen for another hour. Room 317 had been Colonel Marsh's. Now it was occupied by a veteran Emma didn't recognize, late 50s, scarred hands, the hollow eyes of someone who'd seen too much combat. You Emma Reeves? He asked. Who are you? Name's Owen. Colonel Marsh and I served together in Desert Storm. He reached under his pillow and pulled out a sealed envelope. He told me if anything happened, I should give this to the blonde nurse who never flinched. Emma took the envelope. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. Emma, these are the files they killed to protect. Manufacturing records, internal emails, proof of everything. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. Finish it. DM. Owen watched her face. He trusted you. He shouldn't have. He said you reminded him of his daughter, said you had the same look, like you'd been to hell and walked back out carrying bodies. Emma pocketed the USB drive. You should leave. Tonight. Don't tell anyone where you're going. I'm 72 years old with stage 3 kidney disease. I'm not running. Owen's expression hardened. But you should, because someone leaked your location. Titan Forge knows you're here. Emma's entire body went still. How long? Security cameras caught you entering the loading dock 14 minutes ago. I'm guessing you've got maybe 5 minutes before the lights went out. All of them. Backup generators should have kicked in immediately. Silence. Then Emma heard it. Boots on tile. Multiple sets. Moving with tactical spacing through the darkened corridors. Not security guards. Not police. Hunters. Owen's breathing accelerated. Oh, Jesus! Get under the bed, Emma whispered. Don't move. Don't make noise, no matter what you hear. What are you? Now. Her voice carried a command tone that made the old veteran obey instantly. Emma moved to the doorway and listened. 4 men, maybe 5. Suppressed weapons judging by the metallic clicks, night vision optics. They were sweeping rooms methodically, heading toward 317. She had maybe 90 seconds. The shy, apologetic nurse who everyone dismissed vanished completely. What replaced her was something forged in Kandahar, Mosul, and places with no names on any map. Emma Reeves stepped into the hallway, and the darkness welcomed her home. The emergency lighting should have activated within 3 seconds of the main power failure. Emma counted to 5 in the darkness and heard nothing but the mechanical hum of backup systems refusing to engage. Someone had cut the generators manually. Professional work. She moved along the wall using muscle memory, her fingers trailing the textured surface until she found the supply closet. The door opened soundlessly. She'd oiled the hinges herself 2 months ago during a night shift nobody remembered. Inside, her hands found what she needed without sight: alcohol-based hand sanitizer. 50 bottles stacked on the second shelf for the upcoming flu season. The footsteps were closer now. Controlled breathing. Radio silence. These weren't amateurs hired off Craigslist. Emma unscrewed 6 bottles and poured their contents across the tile floor in a wide arc, creating a slick barrier 15 feet from room 317. The vapor stung her eyes. She moved back toward the nurse's station, staying low, counting doorways by touch. The first contractor appeared at the end of the hallway, his night vision goggles casting a faint green glow. He moved like infantry, weapon up, checking corners, fingers off the trigger until target acquisition. Emma watched him from behind an overturned medication cart, her breathing shallow and soundless. He took 4 steps into the sanitizer slick. His boot lost traction. The momentary imbalance was enough. Emma came out of the darkness with an IV pole, swinging it like a staff into the side of his knee. The joint hyperextended with a wet pop. He started to cry out. She drove the pole's base into his throat, collapsing his windpipe just enough to silence him without killing. He dropped hard. She caught his suppressed rifle before it hit the ground, ejected the magazine, and threw both pieces in opposite directions down the hallway. His sidearm went into her waistband, his radio into her pocket. 12 seconds. She was already moving when the second contractor rounded the corner. "Miller's down," he hissed into his comm. "Contact, contact." Emma hit him with a wheeled office chair, the impact driving him backward into a supply shelf. Bandage boxes exploded across the floor. She followed through with an elbow strike to his orbital bone, feeling cartilage crack under the impact. His weapon clattered away. She left him gasping on the floor and disappeared into the darkness again. The remaining contractors would regroup now. Change tactics. They'd realize the floor wasn't as defenseless as their intelligence suggested. Emma's radio crackled. "We've got a hostile. Female. Military training." The voice was calm, professional. Team leader. "Switch to thermals. Converge on the target zone. Authorization to neutralize." She pulled the radio close to her mouth and whispered in perfect Pashto. "You should leave while you still can." 5 seconds of silence. Then, "What the hell was that?" "That's not a nurse," another voice said, younger, uncertain. "Boss, what's going on?" The team leader didn't respond immediately. Emma heard the shift in his breathing pattern over the radio, recognition followed by something that sounded like fear. All units, we've got a problem. Target is potentially military contractor or federal. Exercise extreme caution. Emma smiled in the darkness. They were scared. Good. She used the next 90 seconds to transform the third floor into a battlefield no training manual covered. Fire extinguishers went into doorways at waist height, invisible tripwires in the dark. Medical carts blocked intersections, funneling movement into kill zones. She dumped sharps containers across the floor near the stairwell exits, hundreds of used needles creating a barrier that couldn't be crossed quietly or safely. The hospital's layout existed in her memory like a three-dimensional map. She'd walked these hallways for 18 months, memorizing every junction, every supply closet, every emergency exit. The contractors had blueprints. Emma had lived here. She checked on Owen, still under the bed, breathing too fast but staying quiet, and moved back into the corridor. Her stolen sidearm had 17 rounds. She hoped she wouldn't need any of them. Killing these men would create complications Sarah Chow couldn't protect her from. But if it came down to Owen's life or theirs, the choice was already made. The third contractor came through the stairwell door with thermals raised, scanning for body heat. Emma had wrapped herself in a hypothermia blanket from the cardiac unit, the reflective material masking her thermal signature. She waited until he passed her position, then struck from behind, a precise blow to the vagus nerve that dropped him unconscious without permanent damage. 3 down. How many left? The radio crackled again. This is Dalton. What the hell is taking so long? Emma's breath caught. Richard Dalton, Titan Forge CEO. The man wasn't just orchestrating the operation remotely. He was here, inside the hospital. We've encountered resistance, the team leader responded. Target has military training. We've lost 3 operators. I don't care if she's special forces. She's one woman in a hospital with no backup. Find her, kill her, and recover that USB drive before... Emma turned off the radio. So they knew about Colonel Marsh's files, which meant they'd been monitoring Owen's room, probably for days. They'd let her walk into the trap, hoping she'd lead them straight to the evidence. But they'd miscalculated. They'd assumed Emma Reeves was just a fired nurse desperate enough to play hero. They hadn't considered that the woman they'd dismissed for 18 months had spent 7 years in places where hesitation meant death. She moved toward the sound of careful footsteps, staying low, using the overturned carts and debris as cover. 2 contractors were advancing in tandem now, covering each other's sectors, weapons raised. Professional tactical movement. Emma let them pass her position, then triggered the fire extinguisher she'd rigged as a tripwire. The canister exploded in a white cloud of chemical foam, obscuring their thermals and night vision simultaneously. Both men fired blind, suppressed rounds, punching through drywall and acoustic ceiling tiles. Emma was already behind them, slamming the first man's head into a doorframe hard enough to dent the metal. He collapsed. The second contractor spun, weapon tracking, but Emma had anticipated the movement. She grabbed his rifle barrel and redirected it upward as he fired, the muzzle flash illuminating her face for a split second. He froze. You're... She drove her knee into his solar plexus, folding him in half, then swept his legs. He went down hard on the sanitizer-slick floor, his weapon skittering away into darkness. Emma stood over him, breathing controlled, no elevated heart rate. Stay down, she said quietly. He stayed down. 5 contractors neutralized. She dragged them one by one into a secure room and zip-tied their hands with IV tubing, then locked the door from the outside. None of them would die. Most would need medical attention for fractures and concussions. That wasn't her problem. The hallway fell silent except for the distant hum of the building's HVAC system. Emma checked her stolen weapon, 9 rounds remaining, and moved toward the stairwell where she'd heard Dalton's voice over the radio. She found him on the second-floor landing. Richard Dalton looked exactly like his federal file photo. Mid-50s, expensive suit, the kind of face that smiled during congressional testimony. He was flanked by 2 more contractors, bigger than the others, their body language suggesting personal security rather than tactical operators. He saw Emma emerge from the darkness and actually laughed. "You're the nurse?" Emma said nothing. "I expected, I don't know, someone more impressive." He adjusted his tie. "Do you have any idea how much money you've cost me? How many people I've had to pay off because you couldn't mind your own business?" 47 veterans are dead because of your implants, Emma said flatly. 47 veterans who were already damaged goods. Most of them would have died from complications anyway. Dalton shrugged. I provided a service at competitive rates. If the hardware failed, that's a quality control issue, not fraud. You knowingly sold defective medical devices. I sold cost-effective solutions to an underfunded healthcare system. His smile widened. And I made $17 million doing it, which is significantly more than you'll ever see working night shifts at a second-rate VA hospital. Emma's expression didn't change. The USB drive has everything: manufacturing records, internal emails, financial transactions. Agent Chow will have enough evidence to put you in federal prison for the rest of your life. Dalton's smile faded. Give me the drive. No. Then I'll take it from your corpse. He nodded to his security contractors. Killer. Both men raised their weapons. Emma moved. The first contractor fired, but she was already inside his firing arc, using his body as a shield against his partner. She drove her elbow into his kidney, a strike that would hurt for weeks, and stripped the weapon from his hands in a smooth disarm that looked effortless but required perfect timing. The second contractor adjusted his aim, but Emma had already spun the first man around, using him as a human barrier. Shoot him or drop it? The contractor hesitated. Emma didn't. She swept both men into each other, creating a collision that sent them stumbling backward. One went down the stairs in a tumbling crash. The other caught himself on the railing, dazed. Dalton ran. Emma pursued him down the corridor, her footsteps silent against his panicked scrambling. He burst through the emergency exit into the parking garage, gasping, his expensive shoes slapping against concrete. Emma caught him before he reached his vehicle. She grabbed his collar and slammed him against a concrete pillar, the impact driving the air from his lungs. You don't understand, he wheezed. I have connections, lawyers, politicians. You can't touch me. I'm not trying to touch you, Emma said calmly. I'm just making sure you stay here until the FBI arrives. The FBI? Dalton's laugh was wet with fear. Agent Chow's investigation is dead. I made sure of it. Her witness is gone. Her evidence is compromised. And you? He spat blood onto the concrete. You're a disgraced nurse with a history of mental instability. Who's going to believe you? Emma pulled out her phone. She'd been recording since the stairwell. Every word, every confession. Dalton's face went white. You? Admission of fraud. Confession to ordering a witness killed. Acknowledgement of defective implants causing veteran deaths. Emma's voice stayed flat. And this recording is currently uploading to 3 separate federal servers via encrypted connection. Even if you kill me right now, it's already gone. Dalton stared at her, his mind visibly calculating escape routes and finding none. Who are you? He whispered. Before Emma could answer, headlights flooded the parking garage. Federal vehicles, 6 of them, doors slamming, agents in tactical gear pouring out with weapons drawn. Agent Sarah Chow emerged from the lead vehicle, her expression grim. Richard Dalton, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, manufacturing defective medical devices, and conspiracy to commit murder. She nodded to her team. Take him. Dalton was dragged away, screaming about lawyers and constitutional rights. Sarah approached Emma slowly, her eyes scanning for injuries. You okay? Emma nodded. I got your message, saw the recording upload. Sarah glanced at the hospital building. How many contractors inside? 5 neutralized and secured, 2 more in the garage, all alive. Sarah's eyebrows rose. You took down 7 armed men by yourself? They weren't expecting resistance. Emma, Sarah hesitated. We found something in Titan Forge's communications. Encrypted emails between Dalton and someone inside Mercy Ridge Hospital. Someone who's been feeding him information about federal investigations, staff movements, patient records. Emma's stomach dropped. Who? We don't know yet. The emails use code names, but whoever it is has administrative access to the entire hospital system. Sarah's expression darkened. They knew you were investigating. They knew about Colonel Marsh's cooperation, and they knew you'd be here tonight. Emma thought about her termination meeting, the speed of her firing, the specific accusations. Someone had wanted her out of the hospital immediately, someone who knew she was dangerous. I need to get back inside, Emma said. Emma, this is a federal crime scene now. Let my team... Owen is still up there, room 317. And if someone inside the hospital is working with Dalton, they'll try to silence him before your agents arrive. Sarah grabbed her radio. All units, priority protection for patient in room 317, 3rd floor. Possible hostile still active inside the building. They ran. The stairwell echoed with their footsteps as Emma led Sarah and 3 federal agents back up to the 3rd floor. The emergency lighting had finally activated, casting everything in sick red illumination. Room 317's door was open. Emma's heart rate spiked for the first time all night. She burst into the room with her weapon raised. Owen was still under the bed, exactly where she'd left him. But standing over him, holding a syringe filled with clear liquid, was Chief Nursing Officer Patricia Landry. Patricia looked up as Emma entered, her expression transforming from cold calculation to shocked recognition. "You're supposed to be dead," Patricia whispered. Emma's weapon stayed level. "Step away from him." "You don't understand. This isn't what it looks like." "You're holding potassium chloride," Emma said flatly. "Enough to cause instant cardiac arrest. That's exactly what it looks like." Patricia's hand trembled. "They have my daughter. Dalton's people took her 3 days ago. They said if I didn't help them, if I didn't identify the nurse causing problems," her voice cracked, "they said they'd kill her." Sarah Chow moved into the room, weapon drawn. "Put down the syringe." "I didn't know about the implants," Patricia continued, tears streaming down her face. "I just thought they wanted corporate espionage, medical records, competitive intelligence. I didn't know people were dying." "You fired me to protect them," Emma said. "I fired you to save my daughter's life." Patricia's entire body shook. "And now you've arrested Dalton, and his people will kill her anyway." Sarah lowered her weapon slightly. "Where is she?" "I don't know. They move her every 12 hours, different locations. They send me photos to prove she's alive." Patricia looked at Emma with desperate eyes. "Please, you have to help her. She's 19. She's just a kid." Emma felt something cold settle in her chest. Patricia had been a pawn, desperate, manipulated, but she'd still chosen to protect herself at the cost of dying veterans. "Put down the syringe," Emma repeated. Patricia hesitated, then placed it on the medical tray with shaking hands. Sarah's team moved in immediately, securing her. Owen crawled out from under the bed, his face pale. "Is it over?" Emma holstered her weapon. "Not yet." Because as federal agents flooded the 3rd floor and began processing the crime scene, Emma noticed something that made her blood run cold. The USB drive Colonel Marsh had left for her. It was gone. She'd kept it in her front pocket, secured with a safety pin to prevent pickpocketing. The pin was still there. The drive wasn't. Someone had taken it during the fight, one of the contractors she'd neutralized, which meant an explosion rocked the building. The blast originated from the secured room where Emma had locked the 5 contractors. Fire and smoke poured into the hallway as alarms screamed throughout the hospital. Sarah grabbed Emma's arm. "What the hell? Suicide protocol," Emma said, already running toward the emergency exits. "They destroyed the evidence." They reached the room to find it completely engulfed. Sprinklers activated, drenching everything in chemical-tainted water. Through the smoke, Emma could see the bodies of the 5 contractors burned beyond recognition, and any trace of the USB drive reduced to molten slag. Sarah's face went ashen. "Tell me you have a backup." Emma stared at the flames, consuming the only physical evidence that could have proven Titan Forge's manufacturing fraud. "No," she whispered. Dalton's confession was enough to charge him with conspiracy. The recording Emma had made would help, but without the manufacturing records, financial documents, and internal communications on that drive, the case against Titan Forge's executive team would collapse. Dozens of people had conspired to sell defective implants: engineers, quality control managers, supply chain directors. Without hard evidence, they'd all walk free. Sarah pulled out her phone, her hands shaking. "We'll find another way. There has to be other evidence. Paper trails. Witness testimony." "They killed the witnesses," Emma said quietly. "Colonel Marsh, his son-in-law, and they just destroyed the documentation. Then we rebuild the case from scratch. Hospital records, surgical reports, patient interviews, which will take years, and by then, Titan Forge will have scrubbed everything." Emma's voice stayed eerily calm even as rage built behind her eyes. "They win." Sarah grabbed her shoulders. "They don't win. We have Dalton. We have Patricia's testimony. We have your recording. That's enough to start." But Emma was barely listening. Because standing at the end of the smoke-filled hallway, watching the chaos with an expression of cold satisfaction, was Dr. Marcus Holloway. He met Emma's gaze across the destruction and smiled. Then he turned and walked away into the crowd of evacuating hospital staff, disappearing among the confused nurses and terrified patients streaming toward the exits. Emma started forward. Sarah held her back. "What are you doing?" "He was in on it," Emma said, her voice dangerously quiet. "From the beginning." "You don't know that. He's been dismissing veteran complaints for years, blocking investigations, burying reports." Emma's hands clenched into fists. "And he just watched 5 men die without showing any surprise. He knew about the suicide protocol." Sarah's expression hardened. "We'll investigate him, properly, with warrants and evidence. He'll run, then we'll find him." But Emma knew the truth sitting heavy in her gut like broken glass. Marcus Holloway had access to everything: patient records, federal investigation reports, staff communications. He'd been Titan Forge's inside connection the entire time, feeding them information while Patricia took the fall as the visible accomplice. And now he was walking free while veterans continued dying from implants that should never have been approved. Sarah's radio crackled with emergency updates. Fire department incoming. Hospital-wide evacuation. Casualty count still unknown. Emma watched the smoke billow through the corridor she'd fought so hard to protect. The 3rd floor was being destroyed by fire and water damage. 17 months of working these hallways, memorizing every corner, building trust with veterans who'd been abandoned by a system that promised to care for them. All of it going up in flames because she'd been too slow, too careful, too worried about doing things the right way. Colonel Marsh's final gift, destroyed. The evidence that could have saved hundreds of veterans, gone. And the man who'd orchestrated it all from inside Mercy Ridge's walls disappeared into the chaos like he'd never been there. Owen was being loaded onto a gurney by paramedics, still shaking, barely coherent. He'd survived the night, but Emma knew the psychological damage would haunt him for whatever time he had left. Another veteran broken by a system that should have protected him. Sarah was coordinating with her team, calling for backup, issuing orders to secure the building's perimeter and begin interviewing witnesses. Emma slipped away while everyone was distracted. She had 48 hours before Marcus Holloway disappeared completely. 48 hours to find evidence that Sarah's federal investigation would never uncover through legal channels. 48 hours to prove that the man who'd spent 18 months humiliating her, dismissing her expertise, and blocking her attempts to help dying veterans was actually a conspirator in their deaths. The shy, apologetic nurse was dead, burned away in the same fire that had consumed Colonel Marsh's evidence. What walked out of Mercy Ridge Veterans Hospital that night was something else entirely. Something Marcus Holloway had created by teaching her to stay invisible, to keep her head down, to never challenge authority. And now that invisibility was about to become his worst nightmare. Emma drove to a 24-hour diner 40 miles outside Millbrook, the kind of place where truckers and night shift workers ate greasy food and didn't ask questions. She ordered black coffee and sat in a back booth with her laptop, using the diner's unsecured Wi-Fi to access databases Sarah Chow couldn't touch without warrants. Marcus Holloway's life was about to be examined in ways that would make a proctology exam look gentle. She started with financial records. Publicly available tax documents showed a comfortable salary, $340,000 annually, and modest investments. Nothing suspicious. But Emma had learned during her military intelligence training that people who hide money rarely do it obviously. She dug deeper. Offshore accounts appeared after 2 hours of searching. Cayman Islands. 3 separate LLCs registered under Marcus's wife's maiden name. Total assets, $4.7 million. A doctor making $340,000 a year shouldn't have nearly $5 million in hidden offshore accounts. Emma kept digging. Property records showed Marcus owned a vacation home in the Bahamas purchased 18 months ago for cash. $1.8 million. The purchase date coincided exactly with when Titan Forge began supplying Mercy Ridge with surgical implants. Interesting. She pulled up Titan Forge's corporate structure. Richard Dalton was CEO. The CFO was a man named Lawrence Briggs. The head of medical sales was Jennifer Kowalski, and listed as a consultant on their medical advisory board, earning $80,000 annually, was Dr. Marcus Holloway. Emma's coffee went cold as she read through the contract. Marcus had been advising Titan Forge on veteran healthcare needs, recommending product specifications, and providing insight into VA hospital procurement processes. Legal. Disclosed. Completely above board, except the contract had been signed 3 years ago before any implant failures began appearing, which meant Marcus had known about Titan Forge's manufacturing shortcuts from the very beginning. He'd known the implants were defective, and he'd helped them sell those defective implants to veterans anyway. Emma's hands started shaking, not from fear, but from rage so intense it felt like her chest might crack open. She pulled up Marcus's patient assignment records. Over the past 3 years, he'd been the attending physician for 62 veteran orthopedic cases at Mercy Ridge. Of those 62 cases, 19 had experienced catastrophic implant failures, a 30% failure rate. The national average was less than 2%. Marcus had been personally overseeing the installation of defective hardware into veterans, documenting the failures as patient complications or pre-existing conditions, and collecting consulting fees from the company that manufactured the killing devices. And when Emma had tried to expose the pattern, he'd used his authority to have her fired. She downloaded everything onto an encrypted drive, then made 3 backup copies stored in different locations. Sarah Chow would never have found this through official channels. Bank records required warrants. Offshore accounts needed international cooperation. The Medical Advisory Board connection was buried in corporate filings that took specialized searches to locate. But Emma wasn't bound by federal investigation protocols. She was just a fired nurse with military intelligence training and absolutely nothing left to lose. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered without speaking.
Emma Reeves? The voice was male, young, terrified. My name is Kyle Landry. I'm Patricia's son. They took my sister. They said they'd kill her if Mom didn't help them. And now Mom's been arrested and nobody will tell me where Melissa is. Emma's tactical brain immediately flagged the call as potentially compromised. How did you get this number?
Mom gave it to me months ago. Said if anything happened, if things went wrong, I should call you. His voice cracked. Please. Melissa has diabetes. She needs insulin. If they don't let her, where are you right now? Home. Millbrook. The feds searched our house, but they won't tell me anything. Has anyone been watching your house, following you? I don't know. Maybe? There's been a black car parked across the street for the past hour. Emma felt ice water dump into her veins. Kyle, I need you to listen very carefully. Do not look out the window. Do not draw attention to yourself. Go to your bathroom, lock the door, and wait there. What? Why? Do it now! She heard him moving, breathing hard. A door closing. Lock clicking. I'm in the bathroom. What's happening? The people who took your sister are still active. Dalton was arrested, but his network is intact. They're watching you to see if you lead them to any remaining evidence or contacts. Emma was already moving toward her car. Stay in that bathroom. I'm 40 minutes away. Do not come out until I call you back. Who are you? Emma started the engine. Someone who doesn't leave people behind. She drove back to Millbrook exceeding every speed limit, her mind calculating tactical approaches. If Titan Forge's remaining operatives were watching Kyle, they were either waiting for him to lead them somewhere useful or preparing to eliminate him as a loose end. Either option required Emma to get there first. She parked 3 blocks away from the Landry house and approached on foot, staying in the shadows between streetlights. The black car Kyle mentioned was a Suburban with tinted windows. Engine running. 2 occupants visible through the windshield's reflection. Not police, not federal agents. Contractors. Emma circled around the back of the Landry property, hopped the fence, and entered through the rear door using lockpicks she'd kept from her deployment days. The house was dark, silent. She moved through the kitchen into the hallway, weapon drawn. The bathroom door opened. Kyle Landry stepped out, 19, maybe 20, wearing a college sweatshirt and terror in his eyes. Are you Emma? We need to leave. Now. But Melissa, we'll find her. But if you're dead, she has nobody left fighting for her. Emma checked the windows. The contractors outside will breach this house within the next 10 minutes. We won't be here when they do. She led him out the back, over the fence, and into her car. They were 3 blocks away when she saw the Suburban's headlights activate and turn toward the Landry house. Kyle was shaking. They were going to kill me. Yes. Because of what Mom did? Because of what Mom knows. Emma kept her eyes on the road. Patricia helped Titan Forge by providing information and silencing internal investigations, but she also has documentation proving Marcus Holloway's involvement. That makes her a liability. Mom didn't tell me anything about a doctor. She wouldn't. She was trying to protect you. Emma took a corner hard enough to throw Kyle against his seatbelt. But Titan Forge can't risk her testimony, which means they need to eliminate everyone she might have confided in. So they took Melissa to control Mom, and now they're trying to kill me. Yes. Kyle went silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, harder, older. What do we do? Emma glanced at him. She'd seen that transformation before. The moment when civilians realized the world was more brutal than they'd imagined and decided to fight back instead of breaking. We find your sister, and then we destroy everyone who thought they could use your family as leverage. She drove to a motel outside city limits and got Kyle settled in a room paid for with cash. He sat on the bed, hands shaking, staring at nothing. How do you do this? He asked quietly. Stay calm when everything's falling apart? Emma checked the window sightlines. Practice. And a lot of compartmentalization. You're military. Mom told me that much. What made you stop? Emma thought about the soldiers she'd lost, the ones who'd died despite her best efforts, the ones who'd survived physically but came home broken in ways no surgery could fix. I didn't stop, she said. I just changed who I was fighting for. Kyle nodded slowly. Do you really think we can find Melissa? Yes. How? Because the people who took her made a mistake. Emma pulled out her laptop. They sent your mother proof-of-life photos. Digital images contain metadata, GPS coordinates, timestamps, device information. If I can access those images, I can track where they're holding her. The feds have Mom's phone. I don't need her phone. I need her cloud backup. Emma's fingers moved across the keyboard. Your mother seems smart. She would have backed up everything automatically. It took 20 minutes to crack Patricia's cloud storage using password combinations derived from publicly available information. The proof-of-life photos were there. 6 images sent over the past 3 days. Emma pulled the metadata. The first 3 photos came from different locations: a warehouse district, a residential area, a strip mall parking lot. They'd been moving Melissa regularly, just like Patricia said, but the last 3 photos all came from the same GPS coordinates. They stopped moving her, Emma said. Why? Because Dalton's been arrested. The operation is collapsing. They're consolidating to a secure location while they decide what to do with their leverage. Emma pulled up satellite imagery of the coordinates. An industrial park outside Columbus, Ohio, 3 hours away. The specific building was registered to a subsidiary of a company that shared board members with Titan Forge. Sloppy or desperate. Kyle leaned over her shoulder. That's where they're keeping her. Most likely. Then we call the FBI. Agent Chow. She can send a tactical team, which takes time, warrants, coordination. By the time federal agents are authorized to breach that location, your sister could be dead. Emma closed her laptop. We have maybe 12 hours before Titan Forge's remaining leadership decides Melissa is too much of a liability. So what do we do? Emma looked at him, saw his desperation, his fear, his desperate hope that someone could save his sister when the entire system had failed them. She'd seen that same look on the faces of soldiers begging her to save their dying friends. Sometimes she'd succeeded, sometimes she'd failed, but she'd always tried. Get some sleep, Emma said. We leave in 4 hours. I can't just sleep while you can and you will. Because when we get to that location, I need you sharp and capable of following orders exactly. Exhaustion gets people killed. Kyle stared at her, then nodded slowly. Emma waited until he was lying down, still shaking, but trying, before she stepped outside. She called Sarah Chow. Where are you? Sarah demanded. You disappeared from the hospital. We need your statement. I found where they're holding Patricia Landry's daughter. Silence. Emma, if you have intelligence about a kidnapping victim, you need to share it immediately so we can... By the time you get a warrants and tactical authorization, she'll be dead. You know it. I know it. The people holding her know it. What are you planning? To get her back. Emma, you can't just... I've done extractions in worse conditions against better trained opponents. These are contractors, not special operations. I can get her out. And if you're wrong, if you get killed trying to play hero, Emma looked at the motel room where Kyle was pretending to sleep. Then at least I tried, which is more than the system that's supposed to protect veterans has done. Sarah's voice dropped. I can't officially support this. I'm not asking you to. But if you happen to share your findings with me, I can position federal resources nearby, close enough to respond if something goes wrong. Emma felt something loosen in her chest. The location is an industrial building registered to Meridian Holdings, LLC, subsidiary of a company connected to Titan Forge. GPS coordinates are 39.9842 degrees north, 82.9851 degrees west. I'll have units in the area. But Emma? Yeah? Don't get yourself killed. We still need your testimony. I'll try. Emma ended the call and spent the next 3 hours planning the extraction. The building's layout was available through commercial real estate listings. Single story, 4 main rooms, 2 entrances, roof access through a maintenance ladder. She'd need to get eyes on the location first, determine how many hostiles, where they were keeping Melissa, security measures, patrol patterns. Then she'd need to breach without getting the hostage killed. Simple. Except nothing about this was simple. Emma drove Kyle to Columbus while he slept in the passenger seat, his face young and vulnerable in the dashboard lights. She thought about Colonel Marsh, about the son he'd lost, about the generation of veterans who'd served their country and been rewarded with defective implants and bureaucratic indifference. She thought about Marcus Holloway walking free while 19 veterans had died under his direct care. And she thought about the blonde nurse everyone had dismissed as too gentle, too quiet, too weak to matter. That nurse was gone. What remained was someone who'd learned to survive in places where survival wasn't guaranteed, someone who'd held dying soldiers and promised them their sacrifice meant something, someone who was done being invisible. They reached the industrial park at 4:47 a.m. Emma parked a quarter mile away and used binoculars to scout the target building. 3 vehicles in the lot, lights on in 2 rooms. Heat signatures visible through thermal imaging showed 4 occupants. 1 isolated in what looked like a storage area, probably Melissa. 3 clustered in the main office space, 4 against 1. She'd faced worse odds. Kyle woke as she was checking her weapon. "We're here? Stay in the car. Door's locked. If anything goes wrong, if you hear gunfire, you drive away and call Agent Chow immediately." "I should come with you. She's my sister." "Which is exactly why you stay here. If this goes bad, Melissa needs someone alive to advocate for her." Emma met his eyes. "I know you want to help, but the best thing you can do right now is trust me." He nodded reluctantly. Emma moved toward the building, staying low, using parked vehicles and shipping containers as cover. The dawn was still an hour away. Darkness was her friend. She reached the building's north wall and listened. Voices inside. Mail. Casual conversation about overtime pay and how much they were getting screwed on this job. Contractors complaining about working conditions while holding a diabetic teenager hostage. Emma felt her jaw tighten. She moved around to the roof access ladder and climbed silently, testing each rung before applying weight. The roof was flat, covered in gravel and ancient HVAC equipment. Through a skylight, she could see into the main office. 3 men, all armed. One smoking a cigarette and scrolling through his phone, the others playing cards at a folding table. Sloppy. Overconfident. Good. Emma pried open the skylight using a pry bar from her vehicle's emergency kit. The old metal groaned slightly, but the noise was covered by the HVAC system's rumble. She dropped into the building. The room she landed in was empty. Dark. Smelled like mold and old coffee. She moved toward the voices, weapon drawn, staying in the shadows. The first contractor never saw her coming. She hit him with a chokehold that cut blood flow to his brain for exactly 6 seconds, enough to render him unconscious without permanent damage. He slumped forward onto the card table. The second contractor reached for his weapon. Emma shot him in the shoulder. The suppressed round punched through muscle and bone, spinning him backward. He screamed. The third contractor fired blind, bullets punching through drywall 6 inches from Emma's head. She dropped, rolled, came up behind him, and put 2 rounds into his thigh. He went down hard, weapon clattering away. 30 seconds. 3 hostiles neutralized. She zip-tied all 3 with plastic restraints, then moved toward the storage area where thermal imaging had shown the isolated heat signature. Melissa Landry was zip-tied to a chair, blindfolded, gagged, 19 years old, terrified. She flinched violently when Emma touched her. "Melissa, my name is Emma. Your brother Kyle sent me. You're safe now." She removed the gag first, then the blindfold. Melissa's eyes were red from crying. "Kyle? We're outside waiting for you." Emma cut through the zip ties. "Can you walk?" "I think so. My insulin, they wouldn't give me. We'll get you medical attention immediately." Emma helped her stand. "But we need to move now." They made it halfway to the exit before Emma heard the 4th vehicle pull into the lot. She'd miscounted the heat signatures. There had been 5 hostiles, not 4, and the 5th one was just arriving. Emma pushed Melissa toward the emergency exit. "Run! Don't stop! Kyle's in a silver Honda 3 blocks north. Run!" "But, go!" Melissa ran. The door burst open and Dr. Marcus Holloway walked in holding a pistol, his expression twisted with rage and something that looked like genuine hurt. You just couldn't let it go, he said. You had to keep digging, keep interfering. Even after I had you fired, you couldn't accept that you were out of your depth. Emma's weapon stayed level. You killed 19 veterans. I provided medical care to compromised patients with pre-existing conditions. The implant failures were unfortunate, but statistically inevitable. You knew Titan Forge was manufacturing defective hardware. You were on their medical advisory board. You collected consulting fees while veterans died. Marcus's face flushed. I provided expertise that improved their product development. If some units failed, that's a manufacturing issue, not medical malpractice. You personally oversaw 62 surgeries, 19 failures, 30%. The national average is under 2%. Correlation isn't causation. Those veterans were already damaged. Obesity, diabetes, poor bone density. They were bad surgical candidates who trusted you to help them. Emma's voice went cold. And you installed hardware you knew would fail because Titan Forge paid you $80,000 a year to look the other way. Marcus raised his weapon. You're the one who ruined everything. The investigation was contained. Patricia would have taken the fall. Dalton had an exit strategy. And then you... His hand shook. You just couldn't stop being the noble hero, could you? I'm not a hero, Emma said quietly. I'm just someone who refuses to watch veterans die while doctors collect paychecks. You're delusional. You're a mediocre nurse with a savior complex and military trauma you've never properly processed. Marcus's finger moved to the trigger. And now you're going to disappear. Just another unstable veteran who couldn't handle civilian life. Emma saw his finger tightening. She moved. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, but Emma had already closed the distance, knocked his arm aside, and driven her knee into his solar plexus hard enough to crack ribs. Marcus collapsed, gasping, weapon skittering across the floor. Emma stood over him, her own weapon aimed at his chest. Give me a reason, she whispered. He stared up at her with genuine terror in his eyes. For 18 months, he'd dismissed her, humiliated her, treated her like she was too stupid to matter. Now he saw exactly what he'd underestimated. Emma zip-tied his hands and ankles, then called Sarah Chow. I have Marcus Holloway in custody. Industrial building, coordinates I sent earlier. Melissa Landry is safe. 4 additional contractors secured. Send medical and federal agents. Emma, you can't just... Already done. She ended the call and sat on the floor, back against the wall, weapon across her lap. Marcus was crying now. Actual tears. I didn't mean for anyone to die. The consulting fees helped with my daughter's college tuition. Medical school is expensive. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. Emma looked at him with empty eyes. Colonel Marsh had a daughter too. She died in Afghanistan. Special Forces medic. Killed trying to save wounded soldiers. Her voice stayed flat. You don't get to pretend this was about tuition money. You traded veteran lives for profit, and now you're going to spend the rest of your life in federal prison thinking about the people you killed. Sirens approached in the distance. Emma closed her eyes and waited for the chaos to arrive. Federal vehicles converged on the industrial building with tactical precision that would have impressed Emma under different circumstances. She sat against the wall, weapon disassembled on the floor beside her, watching Marcus Holloway sob into the concrete while 3 zip-tied contractors groaned nearby. Sarah Chow came through the door first, weapon raised, sweeping corners before her eyes landed on Emma. You're not hit? No. Melissa Landry? Safe with her brother. They left 10 minutes ago. Sarah lowered her weapon and holstered it, then gestured for her tactical team to secure the contractors. She crouched beside Emma, studying her face with an expression that mixed professional concern with something deeper. You know I can't protect you from this, Sarah said quietly. Unauthorized extraction, assault on federal witnesses, discharge of a firearm during a civilian operation. I know. Marcus Holloway will claim you attacked him without provocation. His lawyers will argue entrapment, excessive force, vigilante justice. Let them argue. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Emma a video file. This was uploaded to federal servers 90 seconds ago from an anonymous account. Security footage from this building's external cameras. Emma watched the screen. The footage showed Marcus arriving at the industrial park, entering the building while checking his weapon, then emerging 20 minutes later in federal custody. The timestamp proved he'd arrived after the initial breach. The audio captured his confession about the consulting fees and his dismissal of veteran deaths as statistically inevitable. That camera was disabled, Emma said. I checked before entering. Someone re-enabled it remotely. Someone with significant technical expertise who wanted to make sure we had documentation of Holloway's admission. Sarah's expression was carefully neutral. I'm not saying who, but that person probably saved you from federal prosecution. Emma thought about the veterans she'd met during her deployment. The signal intelligence operators who could hack surveillance systems while half asleep. The ones who'd survived long enough to come home broken by defective implants. Someone was watching. Someone was helping. Sarah stood and offered her hand. Emma took it, letting herself be pulled upright. You need to come in, Sarah said. Full debrief, statement, medical evaluation. What happens to Marcus? Federal custody, conspiracy to commit fraud, medical malpractice resulting in death, obstruction of justice. He's looking at 40 years minimum. Sarah paused. But we still have a problem. Emma's stomach tightened. What problem? Titan Forge's executive team. We arrested Dalton, but the CFO and head of medical sales disappeared 6 hours ago. Private jet to the Cayman Islands. They're outside federal jurisdiction, and they took their manufacturing records with them. So they walk free, for now. But the investigation isn't over. We've seized Titan Forge's domestic assets, frozen their bank accounts, subpoenaed their communications. Sarah's jaw tightened. It'll take time, but we'll build a case strong enough to extradite them. How much time? Months, maybe years. Emma looked at the blood on her hands, Marcus's blood from where her knee had connected with his ribs. She'd spent 18 months trying to save veterans through proper channels, through reports and documentation and following the chain of command. And now the people responsible for killing 47 veterans were drinking cocktails on a Caribbean beach while lawyers argued about jurisdiction. I want to testify, Emma said. Sarah's eyebrows rose. The grand jury hearing? Whatever you need, wherever you need it. I'll testify about the implant failures, the pattern of medical negligence, Marcus's involvement, all of it. Emma, testifying means public exposure. Your military record will become evidence, your classified deployments, everything you've tried to leave behind. I don't care. The defense will tear you apart. They'll argue you're unstable, that you have PTSD, that your testimony is unreliable because you're emotionally compromised. Emma met her eyes. Are you saying I shouldn't testify? I'm saying you need to understand the cost. Sarah's voice softened. Once you do this, you can't go back to being invisible. Good, Emma said. I'm done being invisible. They transported Emma to a federal building in downtown Columbus for processing. Medical evaluation cleared her for minor contusions and elevated stress markers. Psychological screening flagged her for follow-up counseling she had no intention of attending. The debriefing took 6 hours. Emma recounted every detail. Her investigation into the implant failures, Colonel Marsh's involvement, the USB drive that had been destroyed, Patricia's coercion, Marcus's confession, the extraction of Melissa Landry. Federal prosecutors recorded everything, their faces growing progressively darker as Emma described the depth of Titan Forge's conspiracy. This is the largest medical fraud case involving veterans since the VA hospital scandals in 2014, the lead prosecutor said. If your testimony holds up under cross-examination, we can use it to pressure the Cayman Islands government for extradition cooperation. It'll hold up, Emma said flatly. The prosecutor studied her. You're very confident. I'm very sure about what I witnessed. When they finally released her at 9 p.m., Emma walked out of the federal building to find Kyle and Melissa Landry waiting in the lobby. Melissa looked better. IV bruises on her arm from the hospital, but color back in her face. She stood when Emma approached, her eyes filling with tears. You saved my life, Melissa whispered. Emma didn't know what to say to that. She'd extracted wounded soldiers under fire. She'd performed emergency amputations in the dark. She'd held dying men while they begged for their mothers. But somehow, looking at this 19-year-old girl who'd been used as leverage in a corporate conspiracy, Emma felt something crack open in her chest. You're going to be okay, Emma said, and meant it. Kyle stepped forward. Mom wants to see you. She's in federal custody, but they're allowing supervised visits. Emma followed them to the detention center where Patricia Landry was being held pending trial. Patricia looked like she'd aged 10 years in 2 days. Gray roots showing in her hair, no makeup. The professional administrator replaced by a terrified mother in a federal jumpsuit. They told me you got Melissa out, Patricia said through the glass partition. Kyle said you went in alone against armed contractors. Your daughter is safe. That's what matters. Patricia's hand shook against the glass. I destroyed so many lives trying to protect mine. The veterans who died because I buried Emma's reports. The families who lost people because I looked the other way. Her voice broke. I thought I was protecting my children, but I was just enabling monsters. You were coerced, Emma said carefully. I was complicit. Patricia's tears came hard now. I knew something was wrong. I saw Emma's data. I read the reports. But I chose my daughter's life over veterans I'd never met, and that choice killed people. Emma thought about the impossible decisions she'd made in combat. The soldiers she'd chosen to treat first while others bled out waiting. The morphine she'd rationed because supplies were limited. The terrible mathematics of triage that haunted her dreams. You did what any mother would do, Emma said quietly. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it human. Patricia looked at her with something like gratitude. The prosecutor said you're testifying, that you're going to help them build a case against everyone involved. Yes. They'll come after you. Titan Forge has connections, money, political influence. They'll try to destroy your credibility. Let them try. Patricia smiled despite the tears. For 18 months, I watched you apologize for existing. Watched you make yourself small so other people would feel comfortable. And now, she pressed her palm against the glass. Now I see who you actually are. And it's terrifying and beautiful. Emma didn't respond. She'd spent 7 years in the military learning to be terrifying when necessary. Coming home had meant learning to hide that part of herself, to be the gentle nurse who didn't threaten anyone. But hiding hadn't saved Colonel Marsh. It hadn't stopped the implant failures. It hadn't protected the veterans who'd trusted a system that failed them. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Sarah Chow found Emma in the detention center lobby. We need to talk, Sarah said, privately. They walked to an empty conference room. Sarah closed the door and activated a white noise generator, standard protocol for sensitive conversations. I got a call from Titan Forge's legal team 30 minutes ago, Sarah said. They want to negotiate a settlement. Emma's blood went cold. What kind of settlement? They're offering full restitution to affected veterans, medical care, compensation for pain and suffering, total payout estimated at $40 million. Sarah's expression was unreadable. In exchange for immunity from criminal prosecution for their executive team. No. Emma, absolutely not. Those executives knowingly manufactured defective implants. They falsified safety data. They bribed hospital administrators and physicians. And when people started investigating, they ordered witness killings. Emma's voice stayed level despite the rage building behind it. $40 million doesn't bring back the 47 veterans who died. I agree with you, but the decision isn't ours. Sarah leaned against the table. The Department of Justice will evaluate the settlement offer. They'll weigh guaranteed compensation for victims against the uncertain outcome of a criminal trial. You're saying they might take it. I'm saying there's pressure from multiple directions. Congressional oversight committees, veterans advocacy groups, defense contractors who don't want the industry's reputation damaged. Sarah met Emma's eyes. If DOJ accepts the settlement, the criminal case ends. Dalton and the other executives walk free. Emma felt something snap inside her chest. She'd fought armed contractors in a darkened hospital. She'd extracted a hostage from a secure location. She'd arrested Marcus Holloway and secured his confession. And now bureaucrats were going to let everyone walk free because it was politically convenient. There has to be something we can do, Emma said. We build a case so strong that DOJ can't ignore it. We find evidence that makes settlement politically impossible. Sarah pulled out her phone. Which brings me to the second thing I need to tell you. We received an anonymous package 2 hours ago, delivered to our field office in Detroit. She showed Emma a photograph. The package contained a laptop, 3 external hard drives, and a handwritten note. The note read, manufacturing records, quality control reports, internal communications, everything Titan Forge tried to destroy. A friend. Emma stared at the image. Where did this come from? We don't know. The package was dropped off by courier service, paid in cash, no return address. But the data is genuine. We verified it against partial records we already had. Who would have access to that information? Someone inside Titan Forge with administrative privileges and the technical expertise to copy everything without detection. Sarah's expression shifted. Someone who wanted the truth exposed but couldn't come forward publicly. Emma thought about the security camera that had been remotely re-enabled, the anonymous upload of Marcus's confession, and now this package containing evidence that should have been impossible to obtain. Someone was helping, someone with resources and motivation to bring down Titan Forge from the inside.
What does this mean for the case? Emma asked. It means we have everything we need to prosecute the entire executive team. Manufacturing fraud, conspiracy, racketeering. The settlement offer just became irrelevant because we can prove criminal intent beyond any reasonable doubt. Sarah smiled grimly. Titan Forge's lawyers are going to realize very soon that their clients are finished.
Emma felt something loosen in her chest. When do we move forward? Grand jury hearing is scheduled for next week. You'll be our primary witness. Your testimony combined with this evidence will be enough to secure indictments. Sarah paused. But Emma, there's something else. The media is going to cover this aggressively. Your name will become public. Your military service. Your role in exposing the conspiracy. You'll be under intense scrutiny. I understand. Do you? Because once this goes public, your life changes permanently. No more anonymity, no more quiet night shifts at hospitals where nobody knows your history. Emma thought about the blonde nurse who'd spent 18 months apologizing, who'd made herself small and invisible to avoid confrontation. That nurse was dead. I'm ready, Emma said. The week before the grand jury hearing passed in a blur of preparation, Emma met with prosecutors to review her testimony. She provided documentation of every interaction with Marcus Holloway, every dismissed report, every veteran who'd experienced implant failure. The media got wind of the story on day 3. Nurse exposes massive medical fraud targeting veterans, ran the headline in the Columbus Dispatch. By day 5, national outlets picked it up. Emma's phone started ringing constantly. Interview requests from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, advocacy groups wanting her to speak at rallies, veterans organizations offering awards and recognition. She declined everything. The morning of the grand jury hearing, Sarah picked Emma up at her hotel. Ready? Sarah asked. Emma nodded. The federal courthouse was surrounded by news vans and protesters. Veterans in wheelchairs holding signs demanding justice. Counter-protesters funded by defense industry groups claiming the case was overblown. Emma walked through the crowd with her head up and her shoulders back, ignoring the shouted questions and camera flashes. Inside the courthouse, prosecutors made final preparations. The grand jury will hear testimony from multiple witnesses, the lead prosecutor explained. But yours is the cornerstone. We need you to walk them through the investigation, the cover-up, and the human cost. Make it personal. Make them understand what was stolen from these veterans. Emma took her position in the witness chair. 23 grand jurors sat watching her, diverse ages, backgrounds, expressions ranging from sympathetic to skeptical. The prosecutor began with basic questions. Emma's background, her employment at Mercy Ridge, her initial observations about implant failures. Then they got to the core testimony. Can you describe what happened when you reported your findings to hospital administration? Emma kept her voice steady. I was told to stay in my lane, that I was overstepping my authority. The report was buried, and I was given a formal written warning. And what happened when you persisted? I was terminated, effective immediately. Security escorted me from the building. Murmurs from the grand jury. The prosecutor pulled up medical records on a screen. Can you identify this patient? Emma's breath caught. It was Colonel David Marsh's file. Yes, Colonel Marsh was a stage 4 cancer patient who'd noticed the same pattern of implant failures I was documenting. He was cooperating with federal investigators. What happened to Colonel Marsh? He died. Natural causes from his cancer, but he left evidence with another patient, Owen, because he knew Titan Forge would come after anyone who threatened their operation. The prosecutor showed another file. And this patient? Owen. Retired veteran, he was nearly killed by contractors sent to recover evidence Colonel Marsh had hidden. Evidence that was subsequently destroyed in the hospital explosion? Yes. But you had anticipated this possibility? Emma allowed herself a small smile. I made copies. Multiple backups stored in secure locations. The grand jury leaned forward. For the next 3 hours, Emma walked them through everything. The offshore accounts, Marcus's consulting fees, Patricia's coercion, the anonymous package with manufacturing records. She showed them photographs of veterans who died from implant failures, shared their names, their service records, their families, made them real, made them matter. When Emma finished, the grand jury room was completely silent. The prosecutor turned to the jurors. Do you have any questions for the witness? A woman in her 60s raised her hand. Ms. Reeves, why didn't you just walk away? You'd been fired. You could have moved to another hospital, started over. Why risk everything to keep fighting? Emma thought about the soldiers she'd served with, the ones who'd died in her arms, the ones who'd come home broken and been betrayed again by the system, meant to care for them. Because someone needed to, she said quietly, and I was the only one willing to pay the cost. Another juror spoke, a young man, mid-20s. The defense is going to argue you're unstable, that you have trauma from military service that compromises your judgment. What would you say to that? I'd say they're partially right. I do have trauma. I watched people die who shouldn't have died. I made impossible decisions that still haunt me, but that trauma doesn't make me unreliable. It makes me someone who understands the cost of failure. Emma met his eyes. And I refused to fail these veterans the way others had. The prosecutor dismissed her after confirming there were no additional questions. Emma walked out of the grand jury room feeling hollowed out and exhausted. Sarah was waiting in the hallway. How do you think it went? Sarah asked. I don't know. They seemed engaged, but Sarah's phone buzzed. She answered, listened for 30 seconds, then smiled. The grand jury just returned indictments for all 7 Titan Forge executives. Conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, criminally negligent homicide. The Cayman Islands government has been formally notified. She squeezed Emma's shoulder. You did it. Emma leaned against the wall, processing. What happens now? Extradition proceedings. Criminal trial. It'll take months, but we have enough evidence to guarantee convictions. Sarah's expression shifted. And there's something else. The DOJ is launching a comprehensive investigation into medical device fraud across the entire VA system. Your testimony triggered a nationwide review. How many hospitals? All of them. Every VA facility in the country will be audited for similar patterns. Sarah showed Emma her phone. You just changed policy for 300,000 veterans. Emma couldn't process the scale of it. She just wanted to save the veterans at Mercy Ridge, the ones she'd cared for during quiet night shifts. Now she'd triggered a systemic investigation that would affect the entire veterans' healthcare system. I need air, Emma said. She walked outside through a side exit, avoiding the media circus at the main entrance. Found a bench in a small courtyard behind the courthouse. 10 minutes later, someone sat down beside her. Emma looked up. Owen, the patient from room 317, the one who'd nearly been killed, was sitting there in a worn jacket, his hands shaking slightly. They let me out of the hospital this morning, Owen said. Heard you were testifying today. Thought I'd come show support. You shouldn't be out of bed. Probably not. But I needed to say thank you for saving my life, for finishing what Colonel Marsh started. Emma looked at his weathered face, saw the decades of service etched into every line. How did you know Colonel Marsh? She asked. Owen smiled sadly. We served together in Desert Storm. Different units, but we crossed paths in Kuwait. He was a good man, spent his whole life fighting for people who needed protecting. He paused. His daughter, the one who died in Afghanistan. She was like you. Wouldn't back down, wouldn't accept injustice. Died trying to save a wounded soldier everyone else had written off. Emma's throat tightened. Marsh knew you were military from day one, Owen continued. Recognized the way you moved, the way you assessed threats. He told me before he died that you reminded him of her. Said maybe that's why he trusted you with the evidence. He shouldn't have. The USB drive was destroyed. But you made copies, finished the mission anyway. Owen stood slowly, his knees protesting. That's what good soldiers do. Complete the objective no matter the cost. He walked away before Emma could respond. She sat alone in the courtyard, watching the late afternoon light fade into evening. Thought about Colonel Marsh's daughter, about the soldiers she'd failed to save, about the ones she'd succeeded in keeping alive against impossible odds. Her phone buzzed, text message from an unknown number. Thank you for not letting them win. The friend. Emma stared at the message. The anonymous helper who'd re-enabled security cameras, uploaded evidence, delivered the package with manufacturing records. Someone who knew her mission and had supported it from the shadows. She typed back, "Who are you?" The response came immediately. Someone who lost a brother to a defective Titan Forge implant. Someone who couldn't come forward publicly without destroying my family. Someone who needed you to be brave enough for both of us. Emma closed her eyes. How many others were out there? People who'd lost loved ones to Titan Forge's fraud, but couldn't speak up because of jobs, family, fear. Her phone buzzed again. The executive's private jet just landed in Miami. They're trying to disappear before extradition goes through. Emma's pulse spiked. How do you know that? Because I'm still monitoring their communications, and I know you're not going to let them run. Emma stood, already calculating. Miami was a 12-hour drive. The executives would try to scatter, use false identities, disappear into countries without extradition treaties. She called Sarah Chow. The executives are in Miami. They're running. How do you... Never mind. I'll notify local FBI. They can pick them up before they leave the country. What if they don't get there in time? Emma, you just testified before a grand jury. You cannot, under any circumstances, get involved in apprehending federal fugitives. I'm just sharing intelligence. You're thinking about going to Miami yourself. Emma didn't respond. Emma, I'm serious. You go anywhere near those executives and their lawyers will claim witness intimidation. It'll compromise the entire case. Understood, Emma said, and ended the call. She drove to her hotel, packed her go bag, and headed for the interstate. Her anonymous friend sent coordinates every 30 minutes. The executives had checked into a luxury hotel under false names. They were meeting with someone who could arrange new identities and transport out of the country. Emma arrived in Miami at 4 a.m., exhausted and running on gas station coffee. The hotel was downtown, expensive, the kind of place where doormen didn't ask questions if you tipped well. Emma watched from across the street as a black SUV pulled up to the hotel entrance at 4:47 a.m. 3 men emerged. She recognized them from the federal files Sarah had shown her. Lawrence Briggs, CFO, Jennifer Kowalski, head of medical sales, and a third man she didn't recognize. They walked into the lobby carrying briefcases. Emma's phone buzzed. They're meeting someone in room 1847. Document exchange, new identities, and passage to Venezuela. You have maybe 20 minutes. Emma crossed the street. The doorman started to intercept her. She was wearing jeans and a jacket, clearly not a hotel guest. But Emma walked with such confident purpose that he hesitated just long enough for her to slip past. She took the service elevator to the 18th floor. Room 1847 was at the end of a long hallway. Emma pressed her ear to the door and heard voices inside. Briggs, the money's been transferred? Unknown voice. Confirmed. $2 million to the Venezuelan account. You'll have full documentation and protection upon arrival. Kowalski. What about the FBI investigation? Unknown voice. Without physical custody, extradition proceedings will stall indefinitely. You'll be untouchable. Emma pulled out her phone and started recording. Then she knocked on the door. Silence inside. She knocked again. The door opened slightly. A man she didn't recognize peered through the gap. Late 40s, expensive suit, the look of someone who facilitated illegal transactions for wealthy clients. Wrong room, he said. Emma kicked the door open. The man stumbled backward. Briggs and Kowalski jumped to their feet. The room was filled with documents, cash, and what looked like freshly forged passports. Emma Reeves, Briggs said, his face going pale. You can't be here. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing about you. Emma held up her phone, showing the recording in progress. I'm documenting a criminal conspiracy to flee federal prosecution. Want to make any statements for the record? Kowalski grabbed her briefcase. This is harassment. We'll sue you for... For what? Recording you while you arrange a legal passage to a non-extradition country? Emma's voice stayed calm. Please, try to sue me. I'd love to see how that plays in court. The unknown man reached for something in his jacket. Emma had her weapon out before he completed the movement. Don't, she said quietly. He froze. Everyone stays exactly where they are. Nobody moves. Nobody talks. Emma kept her weapon level while pulling out her second phone. Sarah, I'm at the Meridian Hotel in Miami. Room 1847. You'll want to send local FBI immediately. She could hear Sarah's exasperation through the line. Emma, I specifically told you, I'm just a concerned citizen reporting suspicious activity. These people happen to be federal fugitives attempting to flee the country. The recording on my phone will provide all the evidence you need. Emma ended the call. The executives and their facilitator stood frozen, calculating odds and finding no good options. You're insane, Briggs whispered. You've destroyed everything. Our careers. Our lives. For what? A few dead veterans who were going to die anyway? Emma's expression didn't change. Sit down, all of you. Federal agents will be here in approximately 8 minutes. If anyone moves before then, I'll assume you're reaching for a weapon. They sat. 7 minutes later, Miami FBI tactical units breached the room. They found 3 federal fugitives, 1 identity facilitator, $2 million in cash, and enough forged documents to add additional charges to the existing indictments. Sarah Chow arrived 30 minutes later, her expression caught between fury and reluctant admiration. "You realize you just gave their defense attorneys ammunition for witness tampering claims," Sarah said. "I never touched them, never threatened them, just recorded their conversation and called law enforcement." Emma handed over her phone. "Everything's documented." Sarah listened to the recording, her expression shifting. "This is actually admissible. They incriminated themselves voluntarily." "I know. How did you know they'd be here?" "Anonymous tip." Sarah looked like she wanted to press the issue, then thought better of it. "The DOJ is going to have questions about how you found them, about why you came here instead of reporting to federal authorities." "I'm happy to answer questions." Emma met her eyes. "But those three aren't running anymore. That's what matters." The arrests made national news by sunrise. "Nurse who exposed via fraud apprehends fleeing executives" became the headline across every major network. Emma's face was everywhere now. Photos from the courthouse. Video of her walking through the Meridian Hotel lobby with federal agents. The nurse who'd been too quiet, too gentle, too weak, suddenly became someone the entire country was talking about. Veterans advocacy groups called her a hero. Defense industry lobbyists called her a vigilante. Legal experts debated whether her actions had compromised the prosecution. Emma ignored all of it. She flew back to Ohio and checked into a motel where nobody recognized her. For 3 days, she slept. When she finally emerged, Sarah Chow was waiting in the motel parking lot. "We need to talk," Sarah said, "about what happens next." They drove to a quiet diner where the coffee was terrible and the waitress didn't watch the news. "The trial is moving forward," Sarah said. "All 7 executives will be prosecuted. Your testimony, combined with the evidence and their attempted flight, makes conviction practically guaranteed." "Good. But there's pressure from multiple directions. Defense contractors want this buried. Congressional oversight committees want public hearings. Veterans groups want you to become the face of their advocacy campaigns." Sarah stirred sugar into her coffee. "Everyone wants a piece of you, Emma, and you need to decide what you're willing to give." Emma looked out the window at the gray Ohio morning. "I just want to go back to work." "Doing what?" "You can't return to Mercy Ridge. The hospital's under federal investigation for administrative failures. Half the leadership has been forced to resign." "Then I'll find another hospital." "Emma, you're national news. Any hospital that hires you will face intense scrutiny. Every decision you make will be questioned. Every patient outcome will be examined for bias." Sarah leaned forward. "Your life as an anonymous night shift nurse is over." Emma felt something cold settle in her stomach. "So what are you suggesting?" "That you decide who you want to be now. The veteran advocate doing speaking tours, the whistleblower consultant helping other healthcare workers expose fraud, the trauma nurse teaching battlefield medicine to civilian hospitals." Sarah paused. "Or you disappear. Change your name. Move somewhere remote. Try to rebuild the anonymity you've lost." Emma thought about the soldiers she'd served with, the ones who'd come home and couldn't adjust to civilian life, the ones who'd tried to disappear and found that trauma followed them regardless of geography. "I can't go backward," Emma said quietly. "Then go forward. But decide what that looks like on your terms, not everyone else's." Emma's phone buzzed. Text from her anonymous friend. "The trial starts in 6 weeks. They're going to try to destroy you on the stand. Prepare accordingly." She showed Sarah the message. "Your mysterious helper is right," Sarah said. "Defense attorneys will try to discredit your testimony. They'll bring up your military service, your deployments. They'll argue you're unstable, biased against authority, prone to violence. Let them argue. Emma, they'll subpoena your military records, your psychiatric evaluations, every classified operation you participated in." Sarah's voice softened. "They'll expose everything you've tried to leave behind." Emma thought about the soldiers who'd died in her arms, the ones she'd failed to save, the faces that haunted her dreams. Maybe it was time to stop running from those ghosts. "Then I'll face it," Emma said. "All of it." But Sarah's expression had shifted. She was reading something on her phone, her face going progressively paler. "What?" Emma asked. "There's been a development." Sarah turned her phone around. The headline read, "Titan Forge executives dead in custody, apparent suicide pact." Emma's blood ran cold. All 3 executives, Briggs, Kowalski, and the third man, had been found dead in their holding cells at the Miami Detention Center. Cyanide capsules, somehow smuggled past security screening. Richard Dalton remained alive, but only because he'd been transferred to a different facility after cooperating with investigators. This wasn't suicide, Emma said. Federal investigators are already looking into it, but preliminary evidence suggests they had help from inside the detention center. Sarah's hands shook slightly. Someone wanted them silenced before they could testify. About what? We already have all the evidence. Manufacturing records, financial documents. Their conspiracy is documented. Unless there was something bigger, something the evidence didn't capture. Sarah pulled up additional news reports. Titan Forge was a subsidiary of a larger defense conglomerate, Meridian Defense Systems. They supply medical equipment to military bases worldwide. Emma felt pieces clicking into place. How big? $8 billion in annual revenue. Contracts with the Pentagon, NATO, the UN. If Titan Forge's fraud was part of a larger pattern… Sarah didn't finish the sentence. Emma's phone buzzed again. Anonymous friend. Get somewhere safe. Now. They're coming for you. Who's coming? Emma typed back. Everyone. Sarah's phone exploded with incoming calls. She answered the first one, listened for 10 seconds, then grabbed Emma's arm. We need to leave. Right now. What's happening? Meridian Defense Systems just filed a $50 million defamation lawsuit against you personally, claiming your testimony constitutes libel and has damaged their corporate reputation. Sarah was already pulling Emma toward the exit, and according to my field office, there's been an active threat assessment. Someone leaked your location. They made it to Sarah's vehicle before Emma saw the black SUV blocking the parking lot exit. 2 men emerged. Not federal agents, not police. Contractors. And standing behind them, impossibly, was someone Emma recognized from old deployment photos. Captain Viktor Sokolov. Former military intelligence, now working private security for defense contractors. Emma had served alongside him in Afghanistan, had trusted him with her life, and now he was pointing a weapon directly at her. Viktor Sokolov looked older than Emma remembered. Lines carved deep around his eyes, gray threading through his close-cropped hair, but the way he held his weapon, loose grip, barrel angled just slightly downward, that hadn't changed. Emma, he said quietly, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Sarah's hand moved toward her sidearm. Emma touched her wrist, stopping her. You know him? Sarah whispered. Kandahar 2017. He was intelligence liaison attached to our unit. Emma kept her eyes on Victor. Good officer. Or I thought he was. Victor's expression flickered with something that might have been regret. Step away from the vehicle, both of you, hands visible. Emma complied slowly. Sarah followed her lead, moving with the careful precision of someone trained not to escalate. Meridian Defense sent you, Emma said. Not a question. They sent a lot of people. I'm just the one who knows you well enough to predict your movements. Victor gestured with his weapon. Your anonymous friend has been feeding you intelligence for weeks. Location data, security footage, evidence packages. You thought you were being helped. Emma's stomach dropped. You. Me. Victor's smile was tired. I've been monitoring you since you started investigating Titan Forge. Made sure you got exactly the information you needed to build a case. Made sure you stayed alive long enough to become a very public problem. Why? Because Meridian needed a scapegoat, someone to take the fall when the fraud investigation went public. He shifted his stance slightly. You were perfect. Decorated veteran with trauma issues, history of bucking authority, the kind of person whose testimony could be discredited as unstable conspiracy theories. Sarah's voice was ice, but her testimony was corroborated by physical evidence. Evidence I provided. Victor looked almost apologetic. Meridian's executive team knew the Titan Forge fraud would eventually surface. Too many deaths, too much documentation, so they made a calculated decision. Sacrifice the subsidiary, preserve the parent company. By making me look like a delusional whistleblower, Emma said. By making you look like a hero who got manipulated. Victor's weapon stayed level. The lawsuit Meridian just filed claims you were fed false information by unknown parties, that you acted in good faith but were used as a weapon against legitimate defense contractors. They're positioning themselves as victims of industrial espionage. Emma felt the trap closing around her. Every piece of evidence she'd used came from Victor's anonymous packages. Every lead she'd followed came from his intelligence. If Meridian's lawyers could prove the evidence was fabricated or illegally obtained, the entire case collapsed, and she'd be left holding responsibility for destroying a major defense contractor based on manufactured data. The executives who died in custody, Sarah said. That was you too. Contractors working for me. Cyanide capsules smuggled in through a detention officer on Meridian's payroll. Victor's voice stayed conversational, like he was discussing weather. Briggs and Kowalski knew too much. They could have testified about Meridian's involvement in the manufacturing fraud. Dead men don't testify. Emma's hands clenched. So what now? You kill us to complete the cover-up? No. I take you into protective custody. Victor gestured toward the SUV. Meridian wants you alive. They want you discredited, sued into bankruptcy, and publicly destroyed. Dead martyrs inspire movements. Broken whistleblowers become cautionary tales. I'm not getting in that vehicle. Then I shoot Agent Chow first. Kneecap. Painful, but survivable. Victor's expression didn't change. Then I shoot you. Same deal. And then we put you both in the SUV anyway. Your choice is whether you walk or whether you bleed. Emma calculated angles. 2 contractors plus Victor. Sarah was armed but outnumbered. The diner parking lot was empty. Nobody to call for help. Nobody to witness what happened next. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Victor noticed. Don't. Emma pulled it out slowly. Text from unknown number. Trust me. 3 seconds. Victor's eyes narrowed. Put the phone... The SUV blocking the exit exploded. Not a massive detonation. A controlled charge that destroyed the engine block and sent both contractors diving for cover. Smoke billowed across the parking lot. Emma grabbed Sarah and ran. They made it to Sarah's vehicle as gunfire erupted behind them. Rounds punched through metal and shattered glass. Sarah floored the accelerator, crashing through a chain-link fence into the alley behind the diner. What the hell just happened? Sarah gasped. Emma checked her phone. New message. Meridian's mistake was thinking I was working alone. Get to the address below. You have 30 minutes before they triangulate your location. An address in Cleveland appeared. Industrial District. Same area where Emma had extracted Melissa Landry. Who is that? Sarah demanded. I don't know, but they just saved our lives. They also might be leading us into another trap. Emma thought about Victor's confession, about how every piece of evidence had been provided by her anonymous helper, about how thoroughly she'd been manipulated. Probably, Emma said. But it's the only move we have. Sarah drove while Emma pulled up everything she could find about Meridian Defense Systems. The company was massive, government contracts worth billions, facilities in 14 countries, political connections that went straight to congressional defense committees. Titan Forge had been a small subsidiary, barely mentioned in Meridian's annual reports, a disposable asset that could be sacrificed without damaging the parent company. But the anonymous evidence packages had contained more than just Titan Forge documents. Emma remembered seeing references to other subsidiaries, other medical supply contracts, other patterns of fraud buried in financial records she'd assumed were just supporting documentation. Pull over, Emma said. What? Pull over, now. Sarah stopped at a gas station. Emma pulled out her laptop and started cross-referencing the data from the anonymous packages. Titan Forge wasn't an isolated case. Meridian Defense had 17 medical supply subsidiaries operating across the VA healthcare system. Each one manufactured different equipment: surgical instruments, prosthetics, diagnostic devices, pharmaceuticals. And each one showed the same pattern of cost-cutting, quality control failures, and catastrophic patient outcomes. Titan Forge's defective implants had killed 47 veterans, but across all 17 subsidiaries, the death toll was over 300. Oh my God, Sarah whispered, reading over Emma's shoulder. Emma's hands shook as she compiled the data. This wasn't about selling a few bad implants. This was systematic fraud across the entire defense medical supply chain. And your anonymous friend knew. They gave you evidence about Titan Forge specifically because it was small enough to prosecute. Sarah's face went pale. But if this goes public, it destroys Meridian Defense completely. Billions in contracts revoked. Criminal prosecution of the entire executive team. Congressional investigations into Pentagon procurement. Emma looked up. That's why they're willing to kill us. We're not just witnesses to fraud. We're sitting on evidence that could bring down one of the largest defense contractors in the country. Her phone buzzed. 20 minutes. Stop analyzing and start moving. They drove to Cleveland in tense silence. The address led to a warehouse that looked abandoned. Broken windows, graffiti-covered walls, no visible security. Sarah parked 2 blocks away. This is a terrible idea. All my ideas lately have been terrible. They approached on foot, weapons drawn. The warehouse's main door was unlocked. Inside, someone had set up a temporary operations center, laptops, monitors, communication equipment, and sitting at a folding table in the center of it all was a woman Emma had never seen before. Mid-40s, sharp features, expensive clothes that didn't match the abandoned warehouse setting. She looked up as Emma and Sarah entered, her expression professionally neutral. "Emma Reeves, Agent Chow, sit down." "Who are you?" Emma demanded. "Rebecca Marsh, Colonel David Marsh's sister." She gestured to the chairs across from her. "I've been investigating Meridian Defense for 3 years, since my brother first noticed the pattern of implant failures and started asking questions that got him targeted." Emma felt like she'd been punched. Colonel Marsh was murdered? Stage 4 cancer accelerated by pharmaceutical contamination. Meridian subsidiaries supply medications to VA hospitals. They'd been cutting chemotherapy drugs with inactive compounds to increase profit margins. Rebecca's voice stayed flat despite the rage underneath. "My brother's cancer was aggressive but treatable. The contaminated medications ensured he died before he could testify." Sarah holstered her weapon. "You're the anonymous friend. You've been feeding Emma intelligence. I needed someone inside the system. Someone Meridian wouldn't see coming. Someone with the credibility to make the evidence public." Rebecca looked at Emma. "My brother told me about you before he died. Said you were the only nurse who actually listened to veterans. The only one who kept fighting even when administration buried your reports. So you used me." "Yes, just like Meridian's been using you." Rebecca pulled up files on her monitors. "Viktor Sokolov approached me 6 months ago, said he was building a case against Meridian from the inside, offered to help expose the fraud. I believed him." "But he was actually setting you up," Sarah said. "Setting both of us up. He fed me intelligence about Titan Forge specifically because it was the weakest link, the easiest fraud to prove. Then he made sure Emma received that intelligence in ways that looked organic. Security footage, anonymous packages, convenient data breaches." Rebecca's expression hardened. Meridian's plan was elegant. Let the Titan Forge case proceed. Let Emma become the public face of the investigation. Then discredit the entire thing by proving the evidence was fabricated. Emma thought about the USB drive that had been destroyed in the hospital explosion. Except some of the evidence was real. All of it was real. That's what makes Meridian's defense so effective. They're not claiming the fraud didn't happen. They're claiming the evidence was illegally obtained through industrial espionage, which makes it inadmissible. Rebecca pulled up legal documents. The lawsuit they filed against you includes corporate espionage charges. If they win, everything you've uncovered gets suppressed as stolen intellectual property. "That's insane," Sarah said. "Evidence of criminal activity can't be protected as corporate secrets." "Tell that to the 14 federal judges Meridian has in their pocket. Tell that to the Congressional Oversight Committee chair who receives campaign donations from Meridian's lobbying groups." Rebecca's voice was bitter. "The system protects companies like Meridian. They have resources to bury anything that threatens their profit margins." Emma stood and walked to the monitors showing Meridian's organizational structure. 17 subsidiaries, hundreds of contracts, thousands of veterans affected. "What's your actual plan?" Emma asked. "Because if you've been investigating for 3 years, you didn't bring me here just to explain how screwed we are." Rebecca smiled for the first time. "My brother left something Meridian doesn't know about. Original manufacturing records from before Meridian implemented their cost-cutting protocols. Pharmaceutical formulations, quality control standards, internal communications proving executives knew about the contamination." "Where did he hide them?" "He didn't. He gave them to the one person Meridian would never suspect." Rebecca pulled out a small external hard drive. "His attending oncologist, Dr. Sarah Brennan. She's been holding them in a safety deposit box for 2 years, waiting for someone to finish my brother's investigation." Sarah leaned forward. "That evidence would prove the fraud predates any alleged industrial espionage. And it would prove criminal conspiracy at the executive level, not just Titan Forge, the entire Meridian operation." Rebecca connected the hard drive to her laptop. "I'm uploading this to federal servers right now, along with documentation of Viktor Sokolov's involvement in the executive murders, and evidence linking Meridian to the assassination attempt on Emma." "They'll fight it," Emma said. "Of course they will. With lawyers and lobbyists and political pressure." Rebecca's fingers flew across the keyboard. "But they can't fight public exposure. I'm simultaneously uploading to news organizations, veterans advocacy groups, congressional investigators, and international media." Emma watched files transfer across the screen. manufacturing records, financial fraud, contaminated medications, executive communications explicitly acknowledging veteran deaths as acceptable losses in pursuit of profit margins. How long until this goes public? Sarah asked. 47 minutes. That's how long it takes for the automated uploads to complete and trigger simultaneous publication across multiple platforms. Rebecca looked at Emma. Meridian will know what's happening within the next 10 minutes. They'll send everyone they have to stop us. How many people are everyone? Victor's team was 6 contractors, but Meridian has relationships with at least 3 private military companies. If they mobilize fully, we're looking at 20 to 30 armed personnel converging on this location. Sarah pulled out her phone. I'll call for federal backup. Which takes how long to arrive? Tactical teams can be here in 40 minutes. Rebecca smiled grimly. Then we need to survive for 47 minutes, just long enough for the uploads to complete. Emma walked to the warehouse windows and assessed their defensive position. Single-story building, multiple entrances, limited cover, no high ground advantage. She'd held worse positions. We're not trying to win, Emma said. We're just trying to not lose for 47 minutes. She started moving equipment to create barriers. Rebecca had enough material stored here, filing cabinets, metal shelving, industrial pallets, to construct improvised cover at key entry points. Sarah helped while monitoring her phone. Federal teams are mobilizing, but Emma, if we're wrong about this, if Rebecca's evidence doesn't hold up, then we die for nothing, Emma said calmly. Wouldn't be the first time I took that risk. 23 minutes into the countdown, Victor's voice came over a loudspeaker outside. Emma, I know you're in there, and I know what you're trying to do. He paused. It won't work. Meridian's legal team is already preparing injunctions to block publication. You're just making this harder on yourself. Emma didn't respond. I respected you in Kandahar. You were a good medic, kept a lot of soldiers alive who should have died. Victor's tone shifted. But you're out of your depth here. This isn't a battlefield. This is corporate law, political influence, systems you don't understand. Emma moved to a window and looked out. Victor stood 50 yards away with at least 15 contractors fanned out behind him. Professional positions. Good sight lines. They'd done this before. She picked up a megaphone Rebecca had among her equipment. You know what the difference is between Kandahar and here? Emma called out. In Kandahar, we were fighting for something that mattered. What are you fighting for, Victor? Stock prices? Silence. Then, I'm fighting to survive. Same as you. No, you're fighting to profit while veterans die. That's different. Those veterans were already broken, already disposable. Meridian just acknowledged what the system already knew. Emma felt rage crystallize into something cold and sharp. Colonel Marsh wasn't disposable. The 47 veterans who died from Titan Forge implants weren't disposable. The 300 who died from contaminated medications across Meridian's other subsidiaries weren't disposable. She could see Victor's posture shift even from this distance. You didn't know about the 300, Emma continued. Meridian kept you compartmentalized, fed you intelligence about Titan Forge, but never told you about the full scope. You're just another disposable asset to them. You're lying. Rebecca Marsh is uploading the complete evidence right now. Manufacturing records, death counts, executive communications. In 31 minutes, the entire world will know what Meridian's been doing. Emma's voice carried across the empty lot. And when that happens, they'll sacrifice you just like they sacrificed everyone else. You think they'll protect a contractor who failed to stop the leak? Victor's radio crackled. Emma couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw his expression change. He lowered his weapon. Stand down, he ordered his team. One of the contractors protested. We have orders to... I said stand down. Victor turned and walked toward the warehouse entrance. Emma met him at the door, weapon ready. He wasn't armed anymore. Hands raised, expression carved from exhaustion. Show me the evidence, he said quietly. Rebecca pulled it up on her monitors. The full scope of Meridian's fraud laid out in financial documents and internal communications. 300 veteran deaths across 17 subsidiaries. Executives discussing cost-benefit analyses that treated human lives as acceptable losses. Victor read in silence for 3 minutes. Then he sat down heavily on a folding chair. I didn't know, he whispered. They told me Titan Forge was an isolated incident, a few executives who'd gone rogue. I was helping contain the damage. You murdered 3 people in federal custody, Sarah said coldly. I followed orders. I thought I was protecting legitimate defense operations from industrial espionage. He looked at Emma. I thought I was doing the right thing. That's what everyone who commits atrocities tells themselves. Victor pulled out his phone, made a call. This is Sokolov. I need to speak to General Hammond directly. Emma glanced at Rebecca. Who's General Hammond? Meridian's CEO, former four-star general. He's the one who authorized the cost-cutting protocols. Victor waited while the call connected. When he spoke again, his voice was ice. General, this is Victor Sokolov. I'm looking at evidence of systematic fraud across your entire medical supply operation. 300 dead veterans, contaminated medications, falsified quality control. He paused. And in approximately 28 minutes, all of this becomes public. I'm giving you one chance to surrender yourself to federal authorities voluntarily. Emma couldn't hear the response, but she saw Victor's expression harden. Then you're a coward and a murderer, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. He ended the call. He looked at Emma. I'll testify about the murders in custody, about Meridian's instructions to discredit your investigation, about everything. Why should we believe you? Sarah asked. Because I spent 20 years in military intelligence protecting this country, and I just found out I've been protecting the people who've been killing the veterans I swore to defend. Victor's hands shook. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect mercy. But I can at least tell the truth before this destroys me. The uploads completed 17 minutes later. News organizations across the country simultaneously published stories about Meridian Defense Systems' systematic fraud. Congressional investigators announced immediate hearings. The Pentagon suspended all Meridian contracts pending review. Emma watched it unfold on Rebecca's monitors. Headlines spreading across major networks. Social media exploding with outrage. Veterans advocacy groups calling for criminal prosecutions. The story was too big to bury now, too public to suppress, too documented to discredit. Sarah's phone rang. She answered, listened, then smiled grimly. Federal prosecutors just arrested General Hammond and 14 Meridian executives. Emergency injunctions to freeze company assets. The SEC is launching an investigation into financial fraud. She looked at Emma. It's over. We won. But Emma couldn't feel the victory. She thought about Colonel Marsh dying from contaminated chemotherapy, about the 47 veterans whose implants had failed, about the 300 deaths Rebecca had documented across Meridian's subsidiaries. Justice wasn't bringing any of them back. Rebecca was crying quietly, her shoulders shaking. My brother spent his last months trying to expose this. He died believing he'd failed. Emma walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. He didn't fail, he just didn't live to see it finished. Federal agents arrived 20 minutes later. They took Victor into custody, along with the contractors who'd stood down. They secured the warehouse as a crime scene and began processing evidence. Sarah and Emma gave preliminary statements, then were released pending formal depositions. Emma walked out of the warehouse into early evening light. The industrial district looked the same. Abandoned buildings, empty lots, broken streetlights beginning to flicker on. But something had fundamentally changed. The nurse everyone had dismissed as too quiet, too gentle, too weak, had just brought down a defense contractor worth $8 billion. Her phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. One last thing. Check your email. Emma pulled up her personal account. New message from an address she didn't recognize. The email contained a single attachment, a personnel file from Meridian Defense Systems. She opened it. Listed as medical advisory consultant with an annual salary of $240,000 was Dr. Gregory Vasquez, Chief Operating Officer of Mercy Ridge Veterans Hospital. The man who'd fired Emma for investigating the implant failures. The man who'd buried her reports and threatened her with termination. He'd been on Meridian's payroll the entire time. Emma stared at the document, feeling pieces slot into final position. Vasquez had fired her not to protect hospital administrators. He'd fired her to protect Meridian's fraud operation. And he was still working at Mercy Ridge, still making decisions about veteran health care, still collecting payments from the company that had killed 300 veterans. Sarah saw Emma's expression. What is it? Emma showed her the file. Sarah's face went hard. I'll have federal agents pick him up within the hour. No, Emma said quietly. What do you mean, no? I mean, Vasquez is mine. Emma drove back to Millbrook alone. She didn't call ahead, didn't warn anyone she was coming. She walked into Mercy Ridge Veterans Hospital at 11 p.m. through the main entrance. Security recognized her, the nurse who'd become national news, and didn't try to stop her. She took the elevator to the administrative floor. Gregory Vasquez was still in his office, working late, completely unaware that his entire world was about to collapse. Emma knocked once, then entered without waiting for permission. Vasquez looked up, annoyed. Then recognition hit, and his expression transformed into something between shock and fear. "You can't be here." "I'll call security." "Call them. I'll wait." Emma closed the door behind her. "Or you can hear what I have to say first." Vasquez's hand hovered over his phone. Emma pulled out her laptop and turned it to face him. "This is your personnel file from Meridian Defense Systems. $240,000 annual consulting fee. Payments dating back 6 years. His face went white. "You knew about the defective implants. You knew about the contaminated medications. You knew everything and you buried it because Meridian paid you to." Emma's voice was perfectly calm. "And when I tried to expose it, you had me fired." I was just... Vasquez couldn't form complete sentences. "Federal prosecutors will be very interested in your involvement. Conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, accessory to negligent homicide." Emma leaned forward. "You'll spend the rest of your life in prison thinking about the veterans who died because you protected corporate profits." Vasquez started crying, actually sobbing. "I didn't know people were dying. I thought it was just competitive intelligence, medical device specifications. I didn't. You knew enough, and you chose money over lives." Emma stood. "Federal agents will be here in the morning. I suggest you find a good lawyer." She walked toward the door. "Wait," Vasquez gasped. "Please, there has to be something. I can testify. I can cooperate." Emma looked back at him one final time. "You had your chance to cooperate when I first reported the implant failures. You chose to fire me instead." Her expression was carved from ice. "Now you get to live with that choice." She left him sobbing in his office and walked back through the hospital she'd worked at for 18 months. The third floor was quiet. Night shift. Veterans sleeping peacefully under the care of nurses who actually gave a damn. Emma paused outside what had been Colonel Marsh's room. Someone had placed a small memorial plaque on the wall. "In memory of Colonel David Marsh, a warrior who never stopped fighting for his fellow veterans." Emma touched the plaque gently. "I finished it," she whispered. "They're all going to pay." She walked out of Mercy Ridge Veterans Hospital for the last time. And as she drove away, her phone buzzed with a final message from the unknown number. "Check the national news." Emma pulled over and opened her news app. Breaking story. Pentagon announces comprehensive review of all defense medical contracts. Thousands of veterans to receive compensation and corrective medical care. The story detailed emergency funding appropriated by Congress, immediate suspension of all Meridian contracts, criminal investigations expanding to include Pentagon procurement officials who'd approved the fraudulent devices. And buried in the 14th paragraph, the investigation was triggered by testimony from Emma Reeves, a former combat medic and VA hospital nurse who spent months documenting systematic fraud despite facing termination and corporate retaliation. Emma read it 3 times. Then she deleted the message thread from her anonymous helper and threw the burner phone out the window. Some mysteries didn't need answers. Some debts didn't need repayment. Some fights were worth finishing regardless of the cost. Emma drove through the night with no destination in mind, the rearview mirror showing Millbrook disappearing behind her. She didn't know what came next, but for the first time in 7 years, she didn't need to hide anymore. The blonde nurse everyone had underestimated was finally, truly free. And 300 miles away, in a federal holding cell, General Hammond was reading the same news story while his lawyers scrambled to find a defense that didn't exist. The calls started 20 minutes later. Senators demanding explanations, Pentagon officials announcing investigations, defense contractors scrambling to prove they weren't involved. And in a quiet office in Washington, D.C., a senior federal prosecutor was opening a file that would become the largest military fraud case in American history. All because a nurse refused to stay quiet. All because a veteran refused to let her brothers and sisters die unavenged. All because Emma Reeves understood something that everyone else had forgotten. Justice delayed is justice denied. But justice served is forever. The trial of General Thomas Hammond and the Meridian Defense Systems executive team began on a cold February morning in federal court. Emma sat in the gallery beside Rebecca Marsh, watching prosecutors present evidence that would reshape how the country thought about defense contracting and veteran health care. The courtroom was packed. Veterans in wheelchairs, family members of the dead, journalists from every major network, congressional observers taking notes for upcoming oversight hearings. And in the defendant's box,
14 executives in expensive suits who'd spent decades profiting from veteran suffering. Hammond looked smaller than his photographs suggested. 72 years old, four-star general retired, CEO of an $8 billion company now facing life in federal prison. His lawyers had tried every procedural maneuver to delay the trial. Every motion dismissed. Every appeal denied. The evidence was too overwhelming. The prosecutor was a woman named Catherine Mills, late 50s, career federal attorney who specialized in complex fraud cases. She'd spent 3 months preparing, reviewing every document, interviewing every witness. Now she stood before the jury and began dismantling the defense's narrative with surgical precision. The defense will argue these were legitimate business practices, cost-cutting measures necessary for competitive pricing, quality control failures that fell within acceptable industry standards. Catherine's voice filled the courtroom. But the evidence will show something different: deliberate fraud, willful negligence, and a corporate culture that treated veteran deaths as acceptable losses in pursuit of profit margins. She pulled up internal Meridian emails on the courtroom monitors, one from Hammond himself dated 3 years earlier. Q3 margins are unacceptable. Medical division needs to reduce manufacturing costs by minimum 30%. I don't care how. Make it happen. Response from the CFO. 30% reduction requires substituting grade A titanium with lower grade alloys. Estimated failure rate increases from 2% to 15 to 20%. Recommend we proceed but increase legal reserves for wrongful death settlements. Hammond's reply. Approved. Settlement costs still lower than maintaining current quality standards. The jury's expressions shifted. You could see the moment they stopped viewing this as abstract corporate malfeasance and started understanding it as premeditated killing. Catherine continued for 6 hours, walking the jury through manufacturing records, financial documents, and testimony from engineers who'd been ordered to falsify quality control reports. Then she called her first witness. The prosecution calls Emma Reeves. Emma walked to the witness stand, acutely aware of every eye in the courtroom tracking her movement. She'd testified before the grand jury, but this was different. This was public, permanent record. The moment when everything she'd fought for either held up under scrutiny or collapsed into nothing. She was sworn in and took her seat. Catherine approached with a folder of documents. Ms. Reeves, can you describe your background? 17 years military service, combat medic, multiple deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. After discharge, I worked as a registered nurse at Mercy Ridge Veterans Hospital. And what was your role at Mercy Ridge? Night shift floor nurse, primarily caring for post-surgical patients and veterans with chronic conditions. When did you first notice problems with medical implants provided by Titan Forge Medical Systems? Emma took a breath. October of last year. I had a patient, retired sergeant, hip replacement surgery 6 weeks prior. He returned to the ER with the implant completely shattered. The titanium had fractured under normal weight-bearing stress. Was this unusual? Extremely. Modern hip implants are designed to last 15 to 20 years. Catastrophic failure at 6 weeks suggested defective materials or manufacturing. What did you do? I started tracking similar cases, cross-referenced surgical records with manufacturer data. Within 3 weeks, I documented 17 veterans with identical failures, all Titan Forge implants, all within 8 months of installation. Catherine pulled up Emma's original report on the monitors. Is this the documentation you submitted to hospital administration? Yes. And what was their response? Emma met Hammond's eyes across the courtroom. I was told to stay in my lane, that I was overstepping my authority. The report was buried and I received a formal written warning. Who specifically gave you this warning? Gregory Vasquez, Chief Operating Officer. Emma paused. I later discovered he was receiving $240,000 annually from Meridian Defense as a consultant. He'd been paid to suppress exactly these kinds of reports. Murmurs through the gallery. The defense attorney objected. Your Honor, Mr. Vasquez's alleged involvement is not relevant to this trial. It's directly relevant, Catherine countered. It demonstrates the systematic nature of the fraud. Meridian didn't just manufacture defective devices. They paid hospital administrators to bury complaints. The judge sustained the relevance. Continue, Ms. Mills. Catherine turned back to Emma. What happened after you were warned to stop investigating? I was fired. Security escorted me from the building. My personnel file was flagged with allegations of insubordination and exceeding scope of practice. But you didn't stop. No. Why not? Emma thought about Colonel Marsh, about Owen, about the 47 names she'd memorized from death certificates.
Because veterans were dying and nobody else seemed to care. Catherine let that statement hang in the air before continuing. Can you describe what happened on the night of November 23rd at Mercy Ridge Hospital? Emma walked the jury through everything. The armed contractors, the hospital blackout, the extraction of Owen from room 317, Marcus Holloway's involvement, the evidence that had been destroyed. The courtroom was silent except for her voice. When she described neutralizing 5 armed contractors to protect patients, one of the jurors, a middle-aged man with Marine Corps tattoos visible on his forearms, nodded slightly. Catherine showed security footage from that night. The thermal imaging, the tactical movement, the precision with which Emma had transformed a hospital floor into a defensive position. Ms. Reeves, the defense will argue you're unstable, that you have PTSD from military service that makes you prone to violence and paranoid thinking. What would you say to that? Emma had prepared for this question, rehearsed it with prosecutors. But now, sitting in federal court with Hammond watching her, the rehearsed answer felt insufficient. I do have PTSD, she said quietly. I have nightmares about soldiers I couldn't save. I have hypervigilance that makes sleeping difficult. I have survivor's guilt that follows me everywhere. She looked directly at the jury. But none of that makes me delusional. None of that makes me see conspiracies that don't exist. If anything, my trauma makes me hypersensitive to people suffering unnecessarily. And I saw veterans suffering because of defective medical devices. And I couldn't walk away from that. The Marine tattoo juror was openly crying now. Catherine's questioning continued for another hour, walking Emma through her role in exposing the larger Meridian conspiracy, the anonymous evidence packages, the extraction of Melissa Landry, the confrontation with Viktor Sokolov. Then came cross-examination. Hammond's lead attorney was a man named Douglas Pritchard, senior partner at one of D.C.'s most expensive law firms, shark-like reputation for destroying witnesses on the stand. He approached Emma with condescending sympathy. Ms. Reeves, you've had a difficult few years, haven't you? That's subjective. Let me be more specific. You were discharged from military service after a psychological evaluation flagged you for trauma-related disorders, correct? Yes. And you were prescribed anti-anxiety medication, which you stopped taking against medical advice. I didn't like the side effects. So you're not currently receiving treatment for your diagnosed psychological conditions? Catherine objected. Relevance, Your Honor? Pritchard smiled. I'm establishing the witness's mental state and reliability. The judge allowed it with clear reluctance. Emma kept her voice steady. I'm not receiving pharmaceutical treatment. I do periodic counseling sessions with a VA therapist. Periodic, not regular. Pritchard pulled out Emma's medical records, somehow obtained despite privacy protections. According to these documents, you've missed your last 6 appointments. I've been busy testifying in a federal fraud case. A few people in the gallery laughed. The judge gavelled for silence. Pritchard's expression hardened. Ms. Reeves, isn't it true that you've had violent altercations at previous employment? Emma's stomach dropped. Define violent. 2 years ago, while working at a civilian hospital in Cincinnati, you physically restrained a physician who was improperly treating a patient. I stopped him from administering a medication the patient was allergic to. The dosage would have killed her. But you used physical force against a licensed physician. I used the minimum force necessary to prevent a fatal medication error. Emma's voice stayed level. The hospital reviewed the incident and cleared me of wrongdoing. The physician was later terminated for multiple patient safety violations. Pritchard moved to his next attack. You've portrayed yourself as a whistleblower, acting in the public interest. But isn't it true you were motivated by personal grievance against hospital administration? No. You were fired for insubordination. You had multiple disciplinary warnings in your personnel file. You were facing termination before you ever started investigating Titan Forge. That's incorrect. My personnel file was clean until I reported the implant failures. Pritchard pulled out documents. According to Mercy Ridge's records and according to records created by Gregory Vasquez after I started investigating. Emma leaned forward. Records that were falsified to justify my termination and discredit my findings. Records that are now part of the federal obstruction of justice case against him. Pritchard tried a different angle. You claim you acted to protect veterans, but your actions put patients at Mercy Ridge in direct danger. You engaged in armed combat on a hospital floor. You created fire hazards with flammable liquids. You caused an explosion that injured multiple people. I neutralized armed contractors who came to murder a federal witness. I used the resources available to protect patients who couldn't protect themselves. And the explosion was a suicide protocol triggered by the contractors themselves to destroy evidence. But you took it upon yourself to act as judge, jury, and executioner. I took it upon myself to do what I was trained to do, protect people under my care from immediate threats. Emma's voice finally showed emotion. Those contractors came to kill Owen because he had evidence about Meridian's fraud. If I'd done nothing, he'd be dead. Would you prefer that outcome? Pritchard stepped back. No further questions. Emma was dismissed. She walked back to the gallery on shaking legs, Rebecca squeezing her hand as she sat down. You did good, Rebecca whispered. The trial continued for 3 more weeks. Expert witnesses testified about manufacturing standards and quality control protocols. Engineers explained how Meridian had systematically substituted inferior materials to increase profit margins. Accountants walked the jury through financial records proving executives knew about the fraud. Viktor Sokolov testified about the murders in federal custody and Meridian's instructions to discredit Emma's investigation. Patricia Landry testified about being coerced into suppressing reports and firing Emma. Dr. Marcus Holloway, now in federal custody, testified about his consulting relationship with Titan Forge and his role in dismissing veteran complaints. Each testimony built a picture of systematic corruption so comprehensive that the defense's arguments that these were isolated incidents, individual bad actors, unforeseeable quality control failures, became laughable. On March 15th, after 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts for all 14 defendants. The courtroom erupted, veterans cheering, family members crying, journalists rushing to file stories. Hammond sat motionless as the verdict was read, his face carved from stone. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. General Thomas Hammond, 45 years in federal prison. The CFO, 38 years. Head of medical sales, 32 years. Down through the executive team, each receiving sentences that ensured they'd die in custody. Additionally, Meridian Defense Systems was ordered to pay $4.7 billion in restitution to affected veterans and their families. The company filed for bankruptcy protection within hours of the judgment. Emma watched the sentencing from the same courtroom seat she'd occupied throughout the trial. When Hammond was led away in handcuffs, he looked at Emma one final time. She held his gaze until he disappeared through the door. Outside the courthouse, the media circus was overwhelming. Cameras, microphones, reporters shouting questions. Emma pushed through without commenting. Sarah Chow caught up with her 2 blocks away. You're not giving interviews? What's there to say? The verdict speaks for itself. Emma, you're a national hero. Veterans groups want you to testify before Congress. The VA is offering you a position in their quality assurance division. You could write your own ticket. Emma stopped walking. I don't want a ticket. I don't want fame. I just wanted justice for the people who died. And you got it. Hammond and his executives will spend the rest of their lives in prison. Meridian is destroyed. Veterans are receiving compensation. Sarah smiled. You won. Winning would be Colonel Marsh still being alive. Winning would be those 47 veterans getting their lives back. Emma looked at the courthouse behind them. This is just less losing. Sarah's expression softened. What will you do now? Emma had been thinking about that question for weeks. I'm going back to nursing, she said, but not at a VA hospital. Somewhere smaller. Rural clinic, maybe. Somewhere I can actually help people without bureaucracy and corporate corruption. You could do so much more than that. More according to who? Emma met her eyes. I became a combat medic because I wanted to keep people alive. I became a nurse for the same reason. Everything else, the investigation, the testimony, the trial, that was all just trying to get back to the original mission. Sarah nodded slowly. Where will you go? I don't know yet. Somewhere quiet. Emma smiled slightly. Somewhere nobody knows my name. 3 months later, Emma started working at a rural health clinic in northern Montana. Population 3,400, 1 stoplight. The nearest VA hospital was 180 miles away, so the clinic served veterans who couldn't make the drive. The pay was half what she'd made at Mercy Ridge. The hours were brutal. The equipment was outdated. Emma loved it. She worked alongside a doctor named Ruth Kellerman, 70 years old, still practicing because the community needed her. Ruth didn't care about Emma's background, didn't ask about the trial, just needed a competent nurse who could handle emergencies and treat patients with dignity. On Emma's third week, a veteran named Jack Morrison came in with complaints of chronic pain from a knee replacement performed 2 years earlier. Emma examined the joint and felt something familiar. Wrong movement, instability, the kind of structural failure she'd seen before. She checked his surgical records. The implant was manufactured by a Meridian subsidiary that hadn't been caught in the initial investigation. Emma felt ice water in her veins. "Mr. Morrison, I need to take some x-rays. This might be more serious than routine wear and tear." The x-rays confirmed her suspicion. The implant was failing, same pattern as the Titan Forge cases, same manufacturing defects. Emma called Sarah Chow. "I found another one." Sarah sighed. "Where?" "Montana, knee implant, Meridian subsidiary called Alpine Medical Solutions." "I'll notify federal investigators. They're still auditing Meridian's other companies." "Sarah, how many more subsidiaries are there?" "We're still finding them, shell companies within shell companies. Meridian had operations in 18 countries. Emma looked at Jack Morrison's x-ray. "So this isn't over." "No. But because of you, we know what to look for. Every Meridian subsidiary is under federal review. Every device they manufactured is being recalled. Every affected veteran is being contacted." Emma ended the call and went back to her patient. "Mr. Morrison, I need to refer you to an orthopedic surgeon. Your implant is defective and needs to be replaced immediately." Jack's face fell. "I can't afford another surgery. My insurance barely covered the first one." "Federal prosecutors are handling that. Meridian was ordered to pay for corrective procedures." Emma pulled up the VA compensation website. "You'll need to file a claim, but the money's there. You shouldn't have to pay anything." Jack started crying. "Nobody's ever fought for us like this before." "Someone should have," Emma said quietly. "A long time ago." She helped him file the claim and scheduled his corrective surgery. That night, she sat in her small apartment and thought about Colonel Marsh, about the soldiers who'd died in her arms, about the veterans who'd trusted a system that failed them. The trial was over. The executives were in prison. Meridian was destroyed. But the work wasn't finished. It would never be finished, because there would always be another corporation cutting corners, another executive prioritizing profit over lives, another system failing the people it promised to protect. And there would need to be people willing to fight back. People who refused to stay quiet when they saw injustice. People who understood that real change came from the bottom up, not the top down. Emma's phone buzzed. Text from Rebecca Marsh. "I'm starting a nonprofit, Veterans Medical Advocacy and Fraud Investigation. Want to join the board?" Emma stared at the message. She could stay in Montana, keep her head down, treat patients and avoid the spotlight. Or she could use what she'd learned to help more people. She typed back, "What would the board position involve?" Rebecca's response came immediately. "Consulting on medical fraud cases, training nurses to recognize patterns, testifying when necessary. You'd still keep your day job, but you'd help us catch the next Meridian before they kill hundreds of people." Emma thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. "I'm in." The nonprofit launched 6 months later. Veterans Medical Justice Initiative. Rebecca ran operations. Emma consulted on cases while continuing to work at the Montana clinic. They started small. A hotline for veterans to report suspicious implant failures or medication problems. A database tracking patterns across VA hospitals. Within the first year, they identified 3 more defense contractors using substandard materials. Federal investigations followed. Recalls. Prosecutions. Emma testified before Congress twice, helping draft legislation for stricter oversight of medical device manufacturing. She gave exactly 1 media interview to a veterans magazine that promised to focus on systemic issues rather than her personal story. The reporter asked why she'd chosen to keep working as a rural nurse instead of taking a high-profile advocacy position. "Because the work that matters happens at the individual level," Emma said. "Policy changes are important. Investigations are important. But at the end of the day, veterans need someone who'll actually listen to their complaints and take them seriously. Someone who'll fight for them when the system fails. That's what I can do here." "Do you consider yourself a hero?" Emma thought about the soldiers she hadn't saved, the ones who'd died despite her best efforts. "No, I'm just someone who refused to accept that veterans dying from preventable causes is normal." She paused. "If that makes me a hero, then we've set the bar too low." 2 years after the trial, Emma received a letter. The return address was a federal prison in Pennsylvania. She almost threw it away without opening.
but curiosity won. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Ms. Reeves,
I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I know nothing I say will change what I did or bring back the people who died because of my decisions. But I wanted you to know that I think about them every day. The veterans whose names were read during the trial, the families who testified about losing loved ones, the 47 from Titan Forge, and the hundreds from other subsidiaries. I told myself I was making difficult but necessary business decisions. I told myself the fraud was justified by competitive pressures and market forces. I told myself veteran deaths were statistical inevitabilities. I was wrong. I was a coward who prioritized profit over the lives of people who'd served this country. You were a nurse who got fired for caring too much. And you brought down my entire company because you refused to accept that veterans dying was acceptable. I will die in prison. That's justice. But you'll keep saving lives. That's redemption for the people I failed. Thank you for not letting us get away with it. General Thomas Hammond, retired. Emma read the letter 3 times. Then she filed it away in a drawer and never looked at it again. Hammond's acknowledgement didn't matter. His regret didn't matter. What mattered was that he'd spend the rest of his life paying for what he'd done, and that the system that had enabled him was being slowly dismantled by people who refused to accept corruption as inevitable. On the 5-year anniversary of Colonel Marsh's death, Emma drove to his grave, small cemetery outside Millbrook, simple headstone, flag placed by the VA. Rebecca was already there, placing flowers. I was hoping you'd come, Rebecca said. Emma knelt beside the grave. Does it get easier? No, but it matters less whether it's easy. Rebecca sat on the grass. My brother died trying to expose Meridian. You finished what he started. That's not nothing. It's not enough either. It never is. But it's what we have. Rebecca pulled out her phone and showed Emma a photo. That's my brother's daughter. She's applying to medical school. Wants to be an advocate for veteran healthcare. Emma looked at the young woman in the photo, early 20s, determined expression. Does she know what happened? She knows her grandfather died fighting corporate corruption. She knows you brought the people responsible to justice. She knows there's still work to do. Rebecca smiled. She's angry about the right things, just like he was. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Emma stood. I should get back. Clinic opens in 3 hours and we're short-staffed. Before you go, Rebecca pulled out a small box. This was in my brother's belongings. I think he'd want you to have it. Inside was a combat medic badge, the one Colonel Marsh's daughter had earned before she died in Afghanistan. Emma's hands shook as she held it. I can't take this. You already earned one just like it. But this one represents what my brother believed, that there are people worth fighting for, and that fight doesn't end just because you come home. Rebecca closed Emma's fingers around the badge. Keep fighting, Emma, the way you've been fighting, the way he tried to fight. Emma drove back to Montana with the badge in her pocket. She thought about the soldiers she'd served with, the ones who'd survived and the ones who hadn't, the ones who'd come home broken and been failed by the system meant to care for them. She thought about the veterans she treated now, the ones struggling with PTSD and chronic pain and bureaucratic indifference, the ones who'd given everything and received so little in return. And she thought about the fights still ahead, the contractors still cutting corners, the executives still prioritizing profit, the system still failing the people they promised to protect. The work would never be finished, but every veteran who received proper care was a victory. Every fraudulent device recalled was a victory. Every executive prosecuted was a victory. Small victories, incremental progress, the slow, grinding work of forcing systems to actually function the way they claimed to. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't dramatic, but it was necessary. And Emma Reeves, the quiet nurse everyone had dismissed as too gentle, too weak, too insignificant to matter, had learned something crucial during her fight against Meridian defense systems. Power doesn't come from titles or authority or institutional position. Power comes from refusing to accept injustice as inevitable. Power comes from doing the right thing even when it costs you everything. Power comes from standing up when everyone else sits down. She'd been underestimated her entire life. By military commanders who saw a female medic and assumed incompetence. By hospital administrators who saw a floor nurse and assumed irrelevance. By corporate executives who saw a whistleblower and assumed they could silence her. They'd all been wrong, because Emma had never needed them to believe in her. She just needed to believe in herself. And in the veterans who deserved better than what they'd been given. The blonde nurse who everyone mocked had become the woman who destroyed an $8 billion defense contractor. The quiet medic who nobody took seriously had become the whistleblower who changed federal policy for 300,000 veterans. The gentle caregiver who was told to stay in her lane had become the advocate who proved that one person refusing to back down could bring down an empire. Emma pulled into the clinic parking lot as the sun rose over the Montana mountains. Ruth was already there, prepping for the day's patients. "You're early," Ruth said. "Couldn't sleep." "The trial stuff again?" "Yeah." Ruth handed her a cup of coffee. "You know what I tell people who ask about you?" "What?" "That you're the best nurse I've ever worked with. Not because of the whistleblower stuff. Not because you took down some corrupt company." Ruth smiled. "Because you actually give a damn about patients. Because you listen when they talk. Because you fight for them when nobody else will." Emma felt something tight in her chest loosen. "That's all I ever wanted to do." "I know. That's why you're good at it." Ruth handed her the patient schedule. "We've got 43 appointments today, half of them veterans. Let's make sure they get the care they deserve." Emma looked at the names on the schedule. 43 people who needed help. 43 opportunities to make a difference. It wasn't saving the world, but it was saving 43 pieces of it. And sometimes that was enough. Emma Reeves, combat medic turned rural clinic nurse, walked into another day of work with her head high and her purpose clear. The executives who'd dismissed her were in prison. The system that had tried to silence her was being reformed. The veterans she'd fought for were receiving the care they deserved. And the quiet nurse nobody took seriously had proven something that would echo far beyond one fraud case or one trial. That underestimating people who refuse to quit is the most expensive mistake you can make. That real power doesn't come from boardrooms and political connections. It comes from standing up when you're told to sit down. It comes from speaking up when you're told to shut up. It comes from fighting back when you're told to accept defeat. Emma had been underestimated her entire life, and she'd used that underestimation to change everything. Not because she was perfect, not because she was fearless, but because she was someone who understood that the opposite of courage isn't cowardice, it's indifference. And Emma Reeves had never been indifferent to suffering, not when soldiers were dying in her arms, not when veterans were being killed by defective implants, not when the system designed to protect them was failing catastrophically. She'd refused to look away, refused to stay quiet, refused to accept that some people didn't matter, and that refusal had brought down an empire. The story of the gentle nurse who became a warrior for justice spread far beyond Montana and federal courtrooms. It became a lesson for anyone who'd ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told they weren't enough. It became proof that one person refusing to accept injustice could change the world. It became a reminder that the people who change history aren't always the ones with power and authority. Sometimes they're the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones everyone assumed would never amount to anything. The ones who prove that being underestimated is an advantage if you're brave enough to use it. Emma Reeves had been that person, and her story, the story of a nurse who refused to stay silent while veterans died, would inspire others to stand up, speak out, and fight back against the systems that tried to silence them. Because real change doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the bottom up. From the nurses and medics and ordinary people who see injustice and refuse to accept it. From the ones who understand that staying quiet makes you complicit. From the ones who choose courage over comfort, truth over security, justice over peace. Emma Reeves chose that path, and in doing so she saved hundreds of lives, brought down a corrupt empire, and proved that the most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone underestimated. The quiet nurse had become a legend, not because she wanted fame, but because she refused to let veterans die in silence, and that made all the difference.